Chapter 1308. It was extremely difficult to fuse the sword principles. Not everyone could do it. Chu Xuanjin was able to do it because of his special body constitution, the Sword King body. However, even with the Sword King body, it was difficult for Chu Xuanjin to fuse the sword domains. The fusion of the sword principle domains was more difficult than the sword principles themselves. At this moment, Yi Guchen's ultimate move could be said to have shocked everyone. That kind of power was truly shocking. The power of the 18 levels of the Azura Blood Sea and the 5 elements sword domain overlapped and crushed the void like a millstone. It was as if nothing could stop the destructive power of the ultimate sword domain. Most importantly, it was only the fusion of the 2 sword domains. Yi Guchen had not fully unleashed the power of the ultimate sword domain. However, even with the fusion of the 2 sword domains, the power was shocking. Gu Xiaoyang's expression changed. His star sword principle domain, Star River illuminating the 9 heavens, was broken by the ultimate sword domain without any suspense. Not only that, but the power of the ultimate sword domain continued to press down on Gu Xiaoyang. Starry Sky Barrier. Gu Xiaoyang hurriedly activated the Stellar Eyes and used a defensive move. Dazzling starlight flowed out of the Stellar Eyes and turned into a starry sky barrier, trying to block Yi Guchen's ultimate move. Rumble. The power of the ultimate sword domain collided with the starry sky barrier. It was like Mars colliding with Earth, bursting out huge waves. In the terrifying collision, the starry sky barrier made a cracking sound and cracks spread out. Break. Yi Guchen once again activated the power of the ultimate sword domain. The fierce and overbearing dual sword principle domain directly broke through the starry sky barrier. Star Dome Divine Light. Gu Xiaoyang's expression changed drastically. An explosive light beam shot out from the stellar eyes. Rumble. A huge explosion burst out and swept across the sky. Gu Xiaoyang blocked with his sword. His body was sent flying, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His clothes were torn, and he fell heavily on the golden arena. Looking at Gu Xiaoyang, who had been severely injured, all the sky prides fell into a dead silence, unable to utter a single word. Just now, Yi Guchen was suppressed by Gu Xiaoyang's stellar eyes and was in danger. Most people thought that Gu Xiaoyang would win. In the end, not long after, the situation was reversed. Yi Guchen used a powerful move to turn the situation around once again. Isn't this battle a little too intense? Many geniuses felt this way. They all felt that this trip to the Holy Imperial Realm was worth it. It was a rare opportunity for them to be able to observe such a battle between geniuses. Outside of the Sacred Emperor world, some of the big shots were surprised when they saw Yi Guchen's ultimate sword domain move. Why do I feel that this technique is similar to the forbidden technique of the Celestial Mountain Sword Clan? Could it be that Yi Guchen is related to the Tianshan Sword Tribe? I don't think so. Everyone knows that Yi Guchen was born in a low-level dynasty. How could he be related to the Celestial Mountain Sword Clan? The saint of the Luofu Sword Pavilion, Elder Qingsong, was also surprised. It is indeed similar to the technique of the Celestial Mountain Sword Clan, but it is much weaker. This young man keeps surprising people. Elder Qingsong thought to himself. To be honest, even Elder Qingsong was tempted by such a talent. If Yi Guchen could be nurtured by the Luofu Sword Pavilion, how far would he grow in the future? Wouldn't it be almost certain that he would become a saint? After all, Yi Guchen's reputation as a natural-born saint had already spread far and wide. No matter what, Yi Guchen has to win this battle first before he can talk about the future. Elder Qingsong shook his head slightly. The battle was not over yet. No one knew who would win, and who would lose in the end. In the arena of the saint's inheritance, Yi Guchen stood in the air with his black hair fluttering in the wind. He held the 9-dragon thunder prison in his hand, looking like a grandmaster. Although he was also injured, his awe-inspiring aura was eye-catching. On the other hand, Gu Xiaoyang struggled to get up in the arena. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and stared at Yi Guchen in disbelief. He did not expect Yi Guchen to have such a powerful trump card. Now, do you still have the confidence you had before? Yi Guchen's eyes were cold. Previously, Gu Xiaoyang had said that he could kill him at will. But now? Who was more embarrassed? Hearing this, Gu Xiaoyang's face turned livid. He did not want to admit that Yi Guchen was stronger than him. He did not want to admit that he was at a disadvantage. However, the current situation was like a slap to his face. He had to admit it even if he did not want to. Now I'll send you on your way, Yi Guchen said indifferently. He did not bother to humiliate Gu Xiaoyang. After all, he was not that kind of person. Ha. Ha. Ha ha ha. However, at this moment, Gu Xiaoyang suddenly laughed. At first he sneered softly, but in the end he looked up to the sky and laughed. What's going on? Is Gu Xiaoyang crazy? He must have had a mental breakdown. Some geniuses saw Gu Xiaoyang's state and secretly shook their heads. However, Yi Guchen frowned slightly. Sometimes crazy people were even more terrifying. Gu Xiaoyang stared at Yi Guchen with his blood-red eyes and said, "Do you think I've lost and have no trump cards? You're wrong. Are the opportunities that I've comprehended these days all for nothing?" Gu Xiaoyang's words enlightened Yi Guchen. It turned out that Gu Xiaoyang still had a trump card. It was the Saint King's inheritance that he had obtained these days. With my strength, I'm still far from being able to use 1,000th of the Saint King's inheritance's power. But in order to kill you, I have no scruples. Gu Xiaoyang's expression was ferocious. There was no longer any of his previous scheming, and it was as if he had gone mad. Vast star stream, Gu Xiaoyang roared, and the stars in the sky seemed to tremble. Endless starlight poured down like rivers returning to the sea, gathering in his body. Gu Xiaoyang's aura also began to rise, directly rising from the 7th layer of the divine dwelling to the 9th layer of the divine dwelling. He was only a step away from the venerables of the heavenly palace. Everyone gasped in astonishment as they watched the changes on Gu Xiaoyang's side. Gu Xiaoyang had already used the 9-star secret technique, and now his strength had increased again. It was simply crazy. To Gu Xiaoyang, this kind of suicidal blessing would also cause irreversible damage. But at this moment, Gu Xiaoyang's eyes had already turned red. Either you die, or I die. He couldn't care less. Gu Xiaoyang had not yet made a move, but his body had already begun to bleed. Blood soaked his clothes, as if he was dyed in blood. This is the vast Star Saint King's secret technique. Yi Guchen, you must die today. Gu Xiaoyang roared in a hoarse voice, filled with endless hatred. Chapter 1309. As soon as the name Vast Star Saint King came out, there was an uproar inside and outside the sacred imperial world, because that was a well-known Saint King expert in the Nantian region. No one thought that the inheritance of Vast Star Saint King would be in the sacred imperial world, and it was obtained by Gu Xiaoyang. Du Guqiuma frowned. He had obtained the inheritance of Azura Saint King in the Azura Bloody Road of the Moro dynasty. Only those who had obtained the inheritance of a Saint King knew how powerful it was. And Vast Star Saint King's strength was no weaker than Azura Saint King. I wonder if Gu Xiaoyang has obtained the domain inheritance of Vast Star Saint King. If he has, my situation is not good. Du Guqiuma frowned. The power of the domain was exclusive to Saint King experts. For example, Du Guqiuma had obtained the Azura Saint King's domain, the Yellow Spring Blood River. If Gu Xiaoyang had also obtained the domain inheritance of Vast Star Saint King, then Yi Guchen's situation would be even more troublesome. He has even displayed the Saint King's inheritance. Gu Xiaoyang has done his best. But it seems that Gu Xiaoyang has only displayed it reluctantly. After all, the time he spent comprehending it is too short. I wonder if Gu Xiaoyang can't hold on first, or if Yi Guchen is killed first. The current battle situation was a little confusing. Both inside and outside the sacred imperial world were discussing it. However, Yi Guchen, who was in the middle of the battle, only raised his eyebrows slightly. There was not much change in his expression. Saint King's inheritance, Gu Xiaoyang. This should be your last trump card, Yi Guchen said indifferently. So what? It's enough to kill you. Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were cold. Vast Star returned to stream, Star returned to Yuan. Gu Xiaoyang stomped his foot, and the void shook. He was like a cannonball, rushing towards Yi Guchen. With a swing of his sword, thousands of starlight gathered, and the fluctuations were extremely powerful. Gu Xiaoyang's aura had reached the 9th level of the Divine Palace, and he was only one step away from the Sovereign Realm. Although Yi Guchen had the seamless Divine Palace and possessed 10 times the true qi, He still couldn't let his guard down when facing Gu Xiaoyang. Similarly, he brandished his sword horizontally. The dazzling sword radiance clashed with Gu Xiaoyang. Boom! With just one strike, Yi Guqin was sent flying backward, coughing up blood. Gu Xiaoyang's strength was more than a few times stronger than before. Seeing that Yi Guqin was at a disadvantage in that exchange, the crowd was once again in an uproar. Could it be that the tables had turned? Yi Guqin's expression did not change. He did not show any signs of panic. Ancient God's body. He summoned his ancient God body, and his body grew to 9 feet. His physical strength increased by 8 times. At the same time, the ancient god's immovable king armor appeared once again. At this moment, Yi Guqin seemed to have transformed into a golden sword god, capable of slaying gods and demons. With Gu Xiaoyang's current state, he definitely won't be able to fully utilize the power of the vast Star Sage King's inheritance. Moreover, he won't be able to hold on for long. Looking at Gu Xiaoyang's gradually cracking body, Yi Guqin muttered in his heart. Right now, Gu Xiaoyang was like a cracked porcelain. As long as he could drag it out, he would be able to defeat him. As long as he could stall, Yi Guqin would not be able to hold on. And Gu Xiaoyang would collapse on his own. Gu Xiaoyang clearly understood this point. He knew that Yi Guqin wanted to stall for time. Dream on. Even if I die, I'll drag you down to hell with me. Gu Xiaoyang's hair was in a mess. It was as if he was possessed. He did not care about anything else. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to kill Yi Guqin. Vast Star Return, Emperor Star Descend. Gu Xiaoyang used his ultimate move again. The 7-star phantom sword in his hand pointed at the sky. A purple meteorite seemed to have come from outer space. It appeared and shot out with Gu Xiaoyang's sword. 8 extremities reincarnation. Complete destruction of heaven and earth. Yi Guqin did not hold back. He used his ultimate move and clashed fiercely with Gu Xiaoyang. Boom! It was as if 100 stars had exploded at the same time. The shockwaves were so powerful that it was frightening. Cough! Both of them coughed up blood and retreated. Yi Guqin's immovable ancient god king armor cracked. It could not withstand more than a few attacks. As for Gu Xiaoyang, it was because of the backlash. After all, he had just received the vast Star Sage King's inheritance. It was too much for him to use it now. Not only was he unable to use much of his power, but it was also a huge burden on his body. If he could deal with Yi Guqin, Gu Xiaoyang would not do such a thing. It was a self-destructive move. Vast Star Return, Heaven-Burning Star. Gu Xiaoyang used his ultimate move again. His attacks became more urgent. He knew that he could not hold on for much longer. If he could not kill Yi Guqin, his body might collapse first. This move was the ultimate move of Vast Star Return. Gu Xiaoyang used this move. Countless flaming meteors fell from the sky, as if they were going to destroy the world. When Yi Guqin saw this, he closed his eyes. He held the sword in his right hand and pointed his left hand between his eyebrows. A strange sword concept spread out. What's going on? Why did Yi Guqin close his eyes? Could it be that he can't resist and is waiting to be killed? Yi Guqin's action attracted the attention of everyone. Yan Wushuang and the others felt as if their hearts had jumped to their throats. However, they did not believe that Yi Guqin would wait to be killed. They knew Yi Guqin's character. He would rather die than submit. He dared to fight with his life when facing Di Haotian, let alone Gu Xiaoyang. When the sword is here, the person is here. When the person is here, the heart is here. I am the sword, and the sword is me. I become the firmament, and heaven and earth become the sacred sword. This is the unity of man and sword. Yi Guqin muttered. Then he suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, it was as if the shadow of a sword overlapped with Yi Guqin's body. At this moment, Yi Guqin seemed to have turned into an unyielding sword that could break the heavens. That's the second level of the sword realm, the unity of man and sword. The Sky Prides were shocked, and their eyes bulged. It turned out that Yi Guqin had entered the realm of one with the sword. Azura's tribulation, destruction of heaven and earth. Yi Guqin used the Azura Sword Dao to activate the Thousand Deities Tribulation Sword technique. In addition, he had the Seamless Divine Abode's tenfold True Qi boost. The power of this sword move was unparalleled. A pair of blood-red sword wings spread out from Yi Guqian's back. As the wings flapped, Yi Guqian's body shot out. The blood-red sword light shook the heavens and earth. Boom! A huge collision occurred, and the shockwaves overturned the firmament for thousands of miles. Humph! Yi Guqian bled again, and the immovable ancient god king armor on his body shattered. However, his expression didn't change as he charged toward Gu Xiaoyang. When Gu Xiaoyang saw that he still couldn't kill Yi Guqian, a crazy look of determination flashed across his eyes. Yi Guqian, you forced me to do this. Vast star domain out. Gu Xiaoyang roared to the sky. The blood vessels in his body almost exploded at the same time. It was like a sacrifice. Then, an ancient starry sky seemed to break through the void and press down on Yi Guqian. Could that be a sacred king domain? Everyone roared, and their hearts shook violently. How powerful was a Saint King's domain? Once he made a move, it was enough to confine, suppress, and obliterate the void. It's over. Yi Guqian will definitely die this time. Gu Xiaoyang risked his life to bring out the sacred king domain. Even if he only revealed a corner, it was enough to easily kill any divine-dwelling sky prides. There was no suspense. Everyone thought that Yi Guqian would definitely die under this move. Chapter 13:10. Saint Kings combined their spiritual dwellings and soul palaces, then merged with their own techniques to form a realm. This kind of realm was a kind of realm power. Different Saint Kings would evolve different realms. For example, the Azura Saint King's realm was a river of blood that could refine, suppress, and devour everything. It was extremely powerful. The Vast Star Saint King's Vast Star realm was equally powerful. With Gu Xiaoyang's current realm and state, it was naturally impossible for him to fully exert the power of the Vast Star realm. However, even if he had only refined a corner, it was extremely terrifying and could be considered an absolute killer move. At this moment, that corner of the ancient star was pressing down on Yi Guqian. It was like a five-fingered mountain that suppressed everything. This was an extremely powerful technique. Not to mention the ordinary geniuses, their hair stood on end and their eyelids twitched. Even Huang Qianqiu, Chu Xuanjin, Jun Xiaoyao, and other geniuses were a little frightened. This move gave them a feeling of death. It's over. Outside the sacred imperial realm, the seventh star lord murmured. Gu Xiaoyang had already fought to this extent. The outcome was already decided. In the end, Gu Xiaoyang might be severely injured and pay a huge price. However, Yi Guqian would definitely die. At this moment, everyone inside and outside the sacred imperial realm was silent. There was no noise or commotion. Everyone held their breath and didn't dare to breathe. They wanted to quietly witness the outcome of this ultimate battle between geniuses. Yi Guqian died. Gu Xiaoyang's body was like cracked porcelain. He used all his strength to activate a corner of the vast star realm, wanting to kill Yi Guqian directly. In the face of the ancient star that was pressing down, Yi Guqian's expression was solemn, but there was no trace of fear on his face. It's indeed over, but you're the one who's finished. Yi Guqian held his sword with both hands. The Anusrava Divine Palace's tenfold spiritual chi was activated to the extreme. Man and sword as one was enhanced to the extreme. The ancient god's body also erupted with extreme power. For moves of 10,000 god tribulation. Heaven's End. Yi Guqian held his sword with both hands and pointed it at the sky. An extremely terrifying storm of sword chi traversed between heaven and earth. The surrounding void imprints were destroyed. It was as if the heavens were shaking, stars were falling, and worlds were being destroyed one after another. The scene was extremely shocking. This was the fourth style of the myriad god tribulation, Heaven's End. Yi Guqian had already comprehended the fourth move, but he had never used it before. This was the first time he had used all Heaven's End. Its power was unparalleled. Even Yi Guqian's leakless divine palace, which could provide a vast amount of true chi, was now showing signs of exhaustion. This meant that the amount of true chi consumed by this move was astonishing. As for its power, it was incomparable to the first three moves. With a slash of the sword energy was destroyed. It was as if it could destroy the heavens and shatter the universe. The true essence of Heaven's End was the destruction of the heavens, and the extinction of all living beings. Boom! This sword move stunned time and space, and all the geniuses were speechless. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. The power of this sword was indescribable. Boom! The sword light blasted into the corner of the ancient universe, bursting out waves of destruction. Endless dazzling light spread out, and the rumbling sound never stopped. Even though their eyes were filled with tears from the light, no one looked away. That was because they wanted to witness this moment too much. Rumble! The sound of a huge star shattering rang out, and that corner of the vast star realm was directly shattered. This was not because vast Star Sage King's realm was not strong, but because Gu Xiaoyang could not use the realm's power. Coupled with Yi Guqin's sword move, it was indeed powerful beyond compare. Under such circumstances, the realm was finally broken. Defeated, Gu Xiaoyang is completely defeated. After seeing this scene, all the geniuses instantly understood in their hearts. Gu Xiaoyang had lost any chance of turning defeat into victory. He had even activated his realm, but it was still broken by Yi Guqin's trump card. He had lost any chance. How? Impossible! Gu Xiaoyang's hair was disheveled, and his body was covered in blood. However, the pain in his body was far less than the anger and humiliation in his heart. He had lost. Even though he had used all his trump cards, even though he had gone all out, he had still lost. He had lost at the hands of an ant in his eyes. Why? I don't believe it! Gu Xiaoyang roared into the sky, his heart filled with endless resentment and unwillingness. He was young Master Nebula, one of the top 10 young masters, and the seat of the Starry Sword Pavilion. He was a 7th grade genius, the darling of the heavens. His cultivation, background, talent, and strength were all 1 in a million. How could he lose? How could he lose? At this moment, Yi Guqin's face was pale. It was obvious that he had overexerted himself, and his body was also severely injured. However, his situation was obviously much better than Gu Xiaoyang's. Gu Xiaoyang, it's over. Yi Guqin murmured. No. I can still make a comeback. Gu Xiaoyang clenched his teeth. A person's death was like an extinguished lamp. He did not want to die, he wanted revenge. Gu Xiaoyang turned around, wanting to escape from the golden arena. However, Yi Guqin's face was indifferent. Since the battle had already reached this point, it was time to put an end to it. The grudge between you and me started with the sword embryo, and it should also end with the sword embryo. Yi Guqin summoned the Khanate sword embryo in his body. A dazzling light burst out from his dantian. It was a palm-sized sword embryo, like a beautiful jade, surrounded by chaotic aura. At the same time, it was enshrouded in an inextinguishable light. That was the power of the indestructible divine embryo. The Khanate sword embryo should now be called the Khanate indestructible sword embryo. Go. Yi Guqin used his fingers as a sword and pointed at Gu Xiaoyang. No. Gu Xiaoyang turned around, his eyes filled with fear and unwillingness. The Khanate sword embryo, which he had once seized and enjoyed all the glory, had now become a fatal weapon. Gu Xiaoyang frantically activated his stellar eyes, forming a starry sky barrier to block the Khanate sword embryo. However, the Khanate sword embryo had the power to destroy everything. It directly broke through the starry sky barrier and rushed toward Gu Xiaoyang. Splat! The Khanate sword embryo pierced Gu Xiaoyang's heart without any suspense. As the chaotic aura vibrated, even his internal organs were shaken into minced meat. Gu Xiaoyang was dead. I hate. When I seized the Khanate sword embryo, I should have killed you. Gu Xiaoyang's body stopped in the void, as if he was frozen. His eyes bulged and his body trembled violently as he stammered out these words. Unfortunately, there is no medicine for regret in this world. Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent. In fact, Gu Xiaoyang did kill Yi Guqin back then. However, what followed was an even more terrifying soul. Sword demon Dugu Wubai. If Dugu Wubai's soul had not transmigrated, Gu Xiaoyang would not have been in such a miserable state. As the saying goes, everything is determined by the past. Where there is a cause, there is an effect. The grudge between you and me ends here. Yi Guqin exhaled lightly. He felt refreshed and his sea of consciousness was clear. It was as if a strand of obsession in his soul had dissipated. That was originally Yi Guqin's obsession. Plop. Gu Xiaoyang's body fell from the sky and heavily smashed into the arena, his vitality extinguished. At the same time, a ray of light suddenly rose from the back of his hand and merged into the back of Yi Guqin's hand. This is? Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows. Chapter 13:11. On the back of his hand, the golden insignia of the 9th generation sword sect was shining brightly. A golden star could be vaguely seen in the sword-shaped insignia. Could it be? Only then did Yi Guqin remember that Gu Xiaoyang was also a 9th generation sword sect cultivator. Back then, the consciousness clone of the 8th generation sword sect cultivator, Yi Tianqing, had told him. The prodigies who obtain the 9th generation sword sect cultivator's insignia would automatically join the sword sect sequence battle. There were only 2 ways to seize the insignia of other cultivators. One was to kill them directly, and the other was to make the other party willingly submit and give up their insignia. For example, Jian Jinghong was also a 9th generation sword sect cultivator. Yi Guqin naturally couldn't kill Jian Jinghong to seize his insignia. As for Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Guqin didn't have any scruples and directly killed him. It should be that every time you get a sequence insignia, a star will appear. Yi Guqin finally understood. In this way, the more golden stars one obtained, the more likely it was for one to become a true 9th generation sword sect cultivator. I have a hunch that the 9th generation sword sect sequence battle shouldn't be too far away, and... Yi Guqin paused. Di Haotian is also a 9th generation sword sect cultivator. Killing intent surged in Yi Guqin's eyes. Killing Gu Xiaoyang could be considered to have solved a long-standing problem for Yi Guqin, and ended a karma. But this was not the end. The person Yi Guqin really wanted to take revenge and kill was Di Haotian. He was an existence that countless prodigies of the Nantian region looked up to and was known as an insurmountable mountain. Even the top prodigies, Chu Xuanjin, looked up to him incomparably. Haotian True Dragon, Di Haotian. In contrast, although Gu Xiaoyang was also powerful and was also a top prodigy, he was still far from Di Haotian. When they were in the Tianhuang Plains, Di Haotian's cultivation had reached the 7th level of the Divine Palace, and at that time, Gu Xiaoyang was only at the 3rd level of the Divine Palace. Now that so much time had passed, how strong would Di Haotian be? 9th level of the Divine Palace, or Celestial Palace Supremacy? Not to mention, Di Haotian had 3 innate divine powers, and was rumored to have the bloodline of the 100 races in the universe. The difficulty of killing Di Haotian was far greater than killing Gu Xiaoyang. Back then, Yi Guqin had been able to severely injure Di Haotian largely because he had taken the 9 deaths no regrets pill, which was equivalent to sacrificing one of his own lives. And now, Yi Guqin did not have any extra lives to sacrifice. Therefore he had to use his true strength to defeat Di Haotian. Although I've used many trump cards to kill Gu Xiaoyang, I've still kept a trump card hidden. Yi Guqin's eyes flickered. His 3 sword domains had fused into his ultimate sword domain. His sky-devouring secret technique. Even his signature Duga's 9 swords had not been used yet. These were the gifts Yi Guqin had prepared for Di Haotian. Apart from this, Yi Guqin's greatest trump card was Duga's Seeking Demons. Right now, Yi Guqin's identity was completely exposed. However, Duga's identity was still not exposed. No one knew that Duga's Seeking Demons was his doppelganger. In this way, Di Haotian naturally could not be on guard. When the time came to battle with Di Haotian, Duga's Seeking Demons would definitely bring a big surprise to Di Haotian and everyone. Di Haotian, you will definitely appear on Sky Burial Island. At that time, Gu Xiaoyang will be your precedent. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. He could not wait to fight with Di Haotian on Sky Burial Island. Bury Sky Burial Island, bury Di Haotian. Just as Yi Guqin's mind was spinning with thoughts, the atmosphere in the entire sacred land of inheritance was dead silent. Dead. Is Gu Xiaoyang really dead? Some geniuses had not even recovered from their shock. Gu Xiaoyang, the famous genius of the Nantian region and one of the top 10 young masters, had died just like that? After a full 15 minutes, the crowd finally recovered from their shock. Countless exclamations and exclamations spread in all directions. Yi Guqin had really killed Gu Xiaoyang. His revenge was a success. Tisk tsk. Who would have thought that the guy Gu Xiaoyang regarded as an ant would kill him instead? Yi Guqin can be said to be the role model of all geniuses in our dynasty. He rose from a low-level dynasty and reached this step, standing at the peak of the sacred imperial world. Who else can do that? Don't be so optimistic. The 3 days haven't passed yet. Moreover, he killed Gu Xiaoyang. Do you think the Starry Sword Pavilion will let him go so easily? Not only Gu Xiaoyang, but the 4 Star Lords also died in his hands. It seems that Song Yuyao, one of the 7 Great Bears, also died in his hands. And Zhou Heng's death seems to be indirectly related to Yi Guqin. So, the 7 Great Bears of the Starry Sword Pavilion all died because of Yi Guqin, right? When everyone thought of this, they all took a deep breath. That was a huge grudge. The 7 Great Bears were the 7 core geniuses of the Starry Sword Pavilion, but they had all died because of Yi Guqin. If it were any other force, they would not be able to accept it. At the moment, the atmosphere outside the sacred imperial world was so solemn that it was terrifying. Many forces turned their attention to the Starry Sword Pavilion. The 7th Star Lord's face was as cold as ice. A surge of horrifying killing intent almost changed the color of the sky and earth. Dead. The 4 Star Lords were dead. So was Gu Xiaoyang. The 7th Star Lord couldn't help but want to rush into the sacred imperial world and tear Yi Guqin apart with his own hands. But the last bit of sanity he had left told him that it was impossible. Star Lord, we can't just let it go. An elder of the Starry Sword Pavilion next to him also looked angry. The Starry Sword Pavilion had lost too much this time. It was immeasurable. The 7 Great Bears had all been killed by Yi Guqin. There were almost no young disciples left. The 7th Star Lord tried to suppress his anger and said coldly, "This is not over." He wouldn't let go of Yi Guqin. Even if he wanted to, the other Star Lords of the Starry Sword Pavilion wouldn't let him go. Those Star Lords were even more powerful than the 7th Star Lord. The 7th Star Lord shook his head and mumbled to himself, "The 7 sons of the Big Dipper are all dead. It seems that it won't be long before the 7 sons of the Big Dipper and the Crepe Myrtle Star Maiden are born." They were supposed to compete with Di Haotian and the others. Everyone thought that the 7 Great Bears were the strongest of the younger generation of the Starry Sword Pavilion. They didn't know that the Starry Sword Pavilion had other hidden geniuses. The 7 Great Bears were supposed to be nourishment and resources for the Son of 7 Stars when they grew up. However, the nourishment had been killed by Yi Guqin. It wasn't hard to imagine that the Son of 7 Stars wouldn't be nice to Yi Guqin. "Yi Guqin, you can't escape the fate of death no matter what," said the 7th Star Lord coldly. Yi Guqin didn't know the details of the Starry Sword Pavilion, but he wouldn't be scared even if he did. On the Sword Dynasty's side, Confuzi and Wu Hongyan were both very worried about Yi Guqin. Yan Changge and the others from the Swallow Cloud Dynasty were also worried. Because Yi Guqin had killed Gu Xiaoyang, it didn't mean that it was over. On the contrary, Yi Guqin's current state was very bad, which would make the other geniuses who wanted to obtain the Sacred Emperor's heritage even more restless. Chapter 13:12. In the Golden Arena of the Sacred Land of Inheritance. Yi Guqin stood in the air and secretly adjusted his breathing. Drops of ancient god blood flowed out of the sealed ancient god heart in his body to nourish his injured body. Yi Guqin also took out some quasi-saint medicine and elixirs to consume. The battle was unusually intense, and Yi Guqin had expended a lot of energy to kill Gu Xiaoyang. Although his physical body was strong, he was still injured. Moreover, after using the 4th move of the 10,000 God Tribulation, Yi Guqin's divine dwelling vital energy was slightly depleted and needed time to recover. At this moment, many geniuses outside the Golden Arena were ready to make a move. After all, Yi Guqin's condition seemed to have hit rock bottom. This was the best time to take advantage of him. Moreover, the Sacred Emperor's inheritance was too tempting. No genius could resist such an opportunity. Sorry, although it's not good to take advantage of others, I really want the Sacred Emperor's inheritance. Which one was the first to make a move? She was a member of the demonic sect and did not care about good or evil. At this moment, she twisted her waist and was about to make a move. "Are you looking down on me?" Yi Songyue, who was dressed in a white robe, blocked Won'er again. Won'er frowned slightly and then said with a teasing expression. Won'er was wondering why Sister Tsungyue would help Jiankui, who she did not know. Now I understand. The Khanate Sword Embryo and the Immortal Divine Embryo have telepathy. No wonder they are a perfect match. Don't talk nonsense. Yi Tsungyue reprimanded coldly, blushing slightly. TSK, blushing just like that. But sister, don't forget that you and the Demon King already have a love story. Are you going to fall in love with someone else now? Won'er deliberately said this to expose Yi Tsungyue's inner scar. Yi Tsungyue's face paled slightly, and she gritted her teeth. Her feelings toward Duge Chioemo were also very complicated. However, Yi Tsungyue had the biggest doubt in her heart. Why did her Immortal Divine Embryo condense in Khanate Sword Embryo when Duge Chioemo took her body? Could it be that between these two, Yi Tsungyue was shocked? She glanced at the white-haired Duge Chioemo from the corner of her eyes before looking at Yi Guchen. Their temperaments were completely different. They could even be said to be two extremes. One of them was domineering, and his demonic might was overwhelming. One was deep and reserved, like an ancient well without ripples. However, their faces were vaguely similar. Some people noticed it, but they didn't pay much attention to it. Could it be? No. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. An almost impossible thought arose in Yi Tsungyue's mind, but she quickly rejected it. This kind of thing was too shocking and simply impossible to believe. Taking a step back, even if that was the case. However, Duge's strength in Chioemo was there for all to see. If this strength was only a clone, it was simply unimaginable. I must have thought wrong. Yi Tsungyue cut off this thought. Sister Tsungyue, are you thinking about how to choose between Duge Chioemo and Yi Guchen? To think that you're called a fairy when you're actually a scum. Won'er continued her psychological attack. Shut up. Yi Tsungyue's black hair danced and her snow-white robe fluttered. Her sword vibrated and her flawless face was filled with killing intent. Won'er had touched her bottom line. On the other side, Gu Zun's eyes flickered. He couldn't wait to fight Yi Guchen and settle their grudge. However, given Yi Guchen's current state, it would be a dishonorable victory if he fought. Gu Zun might even leave behind an inner demon. Therefore, Gu Zun didn't make a move. This surprised Zhao Shinkong a little. It seems that you're not that kind of person. Zhao Shinkong said indifferently. Humph. I just don't want to leave a bad name for taking advantage of others. I want to kill him fair and square. Gu Zun said hoarsely. Haha Gu Zun, if you don't make a move I will. The Sacred Emperor's legacy can't be ignored. Dao Wuming smiled faintly. Qin Qingxiao once again stood in front of Dao Wuming. Duge Chioemo, you know that Qin Qingxiao alone can't stop me. I might even kill him. Dao Wuming frowned. On the other side, Duge Chioemo said indifferently. If I kill him, then so be it. I've never thought of letting Qin Qingxiao walk out of the Sacred Emperor world alive. Duge Chioemo's emotionless words sent a chill through the hearts of the surrounding geniuses. Duge Chioemo was too ruthless. Duge Chioemo naturally had his reasons for saying that. Even if he brought Qin Qingxiao out of the Sacred Emperor world, given his status as a member of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, he would still be forced to hand Qin Qingxiao over to them. Rather than that, he might as well let Qin Qingxiao release his last bit of light and heat to help Yi Guchen fend off the attacks of the other geniuses. Duge Chioemo, do you really want to die? Huang Qianqiu's tone was incomparably cold. How dare Huang Qianqiu tell an Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion disciple to die in front of him? It was a slap to his face. You can't kill me yet. Duge Chioemo's tone was indifferent. You're courting death. Huang Qianqiu made a move. He would definitely make a move now. Apart from the Sacred Emperor's legacy, Huang Qianqiu also wanted Yi Guchen's ultimate sword domain. It was also rumored that the primordial demon sword, God Devourer, was with him. Moreover, Huang Qianqiu was also a 9th-generation sword master. If he could kill Yi Guchen with his own hands, he would be able to obtain 2 sequence insignias at once. This was a huge gain for Huang Qianqiu. Therefore, Huang Qianqiu would definitely not let go of this opportunity. On the other side, Chu Xuanzhen's eyes were shining. It's indeed unexpected that he could kill Gu Xiaoyang. However, Senior brother Di Haotian is far more powerful than Gu Xiaoyang. I'd like to see how much strength Yi Guqin has. Chu Xuanjin couldn't hold back and wanted to make a move. Unsurprisingly, Jun Xiaoyao blocked his way again. Jun Xiaorao, do you really want to stop me? Chu Xuanjin's eyes were filled with hostility. Yi Guqin is my friend. I won't sit back and watch him be in danger. Jun Xiaoyao's handsome face was calm and indifferent with a smile. Mind your own business. Chu Xuanjin made a move. Sword chi surged. Heavenly mandate unsheath. Jun Xiaoyao's body shook. The sword pouch on his back opened, and the heavenly mandate sword rose into the air. These two were both of the top 10 young masters. At this moment, the battle was extremely intense. Apart from them, many other geniuses were also tempted. Although most of the geniuses were a little afraid of the strength Yi Guqin had displayed. However, there were still a small number of geniuses who didn't care about their lives and wanted to take the risk. Whoever dares to make a move will have to ask the swordsman of the Sword Dynasty first. Jian Jinghong was the first to step out. After some time of recovery, the injuries of these swordsmen had also recovered a lot. Whoever dares to take advantage of the situation and make a move on my master, I Mu Xingzu, will turn him into a ghost under my sword. Mu Xingzu also stepped out. There were also Xuanlian, Jiang Fengmian, Ling Emoshu, Su Zihao, Suki Miyazaki, Han Lingxian, Ling Mayin and Kong Kong. The 10 swordsmen of the Sword Dynasty stood in a row outside the arena. Their aura was like a rainbow, guarding the injured Yi Guqin like an iron wall. You guys? Yi Guqin's heart was touched. He was the kind of person who was cold and reclusive. It was rare for him to be able to touch Yi Guqin's heart. But now looking at the backs of the 10 swordsmen, there were also Jun Xiaoyao, Zhao Xinkong, Yi Songyue, and the others who were helping him. Yi Guqin felt a little emotional for a moment. However, those geniuses didn't feel this way. They just wanted to take the risk. If they could really get the inheritance of the Saint Emperor, any price would be worth it. Chapter 13:13. The Sacred Emperor's inheritance was too tempting. If one could obtain it, even a pig would be able to fly and become a peerless paragon. There were still more than 2 days left before the 3-day deadline. In addition, Yi Guqin had just finished his battle and was injured. His aura had fallen to rock bottom. It was the best time to make a move. Meanwhile, Huang Qianqiu, Chu Xuanjin, and the other top paragons were also held back by the other paragons. This gave the paragons a free period. Everyone, that's the Sacred Emperor's inheritance. You won't get it again if you miss it. Are you really willing to give up just like that? An illusory voice came from the crowd. It was unknown who it was. It was obvious that the paragon wanted to incite the crowd, but did not want to expose his identity lest he was targeted by the Sword Son of the Sword Dynasty. That's right, this is the only chance to become a dragon. If you miss this opportunity, you'll be at the bottom forever. Another voice sounded again. Hearing this, some of the paragons present were eager to make a move. There were still more than half of the paragons who did not dare to act rashly after seeing Yi Guqin's strength. However, there were still a small number of paragons whose eyes were bloodshot and surged with greed. With a great reward, there would definitely be courageous men. Moreover, the Sacred Emperor's inheritance was more precious than any reward. Everyone, let's attack together. Whoever gets the inheritance in the end will depend on luck. Let's go. Finally, some paragons could not help but make a move. A slight move would affect the whole situation. As if a fuse had been lit, more and more paragons could not help but make a move. In just a short while, more than 100 paragons rushed towards the golden arena with bloodshot eyes and a greedy and crazy light. It was like a swarm of locusts. You're courting death. Jian Jinghong's eyes flickered. Although the 10 sword sons had not fully recovered from their injuries, they had recovered most of their strength after this period of rest. Heavenly Sword Dao. Jian Jinghong made a move. The power of the creation-level Sword Dao surged out and blocked the paragons. The rest of the Sword Sons, Mu Xingzu, Jiang Fengmian, Ling Emoshu, and the others all unleashed their auras. Like a steel wall, they blocked the attacks of the group of Sky Prides. In addition, Zhao Xiaodi bit her pink lips and stepped forward bravely. Logically speaking, She couldn't just stand by and watch. Kill. Battle cries, collisions, and explosions rang out incessantly. Over 100 prodigies and 10 sword sons of the Sword Dynasty engaged in an earth-shattering battle. His true chi was vigorous, and his moves were unhindered. Rubble pierced through the air, and heaven and earth shook. This was a chaotic battle. The top geniuses were playing a game. Mid-level prodigies were also fighting each other. It was hard to imagine that Yi Guqin was the cause of such a chaotic battle. Outside the Holy Imperial Realm, countless people were exclaiming at the sight. No matter what happens in the Holy Imperial world, Yi Guqin's name will shake the entire South Horizon region. Yeah, he's stirring up a storm by himself. If he doesn't die, he'll have an emperor and 4 sovereigns in the future. He seems to have a grudge against Di Haoyin. Looks like we'll be able to watch a good show on Sky Burial Island. Gu Xiaoyang can't compare to Di Haoyin. Rumor has it that he's already reached the supremacy realm. Really? Is he that terrifying? Sigh, we'll know when the time comes. Right now, let's see if Yi Guqin can survive. Outside the Holy Imperial Realm, all the forces were discussing animatedly. Some wanted to see Yi Guqin's performance in the future. There were also some people who wished that Yi Guqin would die in this battle. Some were thinking about how to find the whereabouts of the immemorial demon sword from Yi Guqin after the battle at the Holy Imperial Realm. All in all kinds of people had different ideas. In the Holy Emperor's heritage ground, the battle continued. More and more Sky Prides joined in. No matter how strong Jian Jinghong and the others were, they were still somewhat inferior. At this moment, Zhao Shinkong's eyes flashed. He couldn't help but take action. Because Gu Zun no longer intended to deal with Yi Guqin, Zhao Shinkong didn't need to divert his attention to stop him. All of you scram! Zhao Shinkong's long hair fluttered in the wind as he thrust his Daoyuo golden spear forward. The spear light pierced through the bodies of 4 or 5 Sky Prides. Damn it, Zhao Shinkong also joined in. Many of the Sky Prides who took action cursed inwardly. Although Zhao Shinkong had lost to Yi Guqin, his strength was still comparable to that of an overlord-level Sky Pride. The addition of Zhao Shinkong immediately lessened the pressure on Jian Jinghong and the others. But that wasn't all. Someone else actually took action. A terrifying beam of saber chi streaked across the sky, instantly turning 7 or 8 Sky Prides into a bloody pulp. Gu Zun. What's he doing now? That's right. Doesn't he have a grudge against Yi Guqin? Is there something wrong with his head? The one who took action was Gu Zun. All the Sky Pride's expressions were extremely ugly as they cursed Gu Zun inwardly 1,000 times. He can only die by my saber. Who do you think you are? Gu Zun's hair was a mess, his clothes were sloppy, and he emitted a strange smell. But there was no doubt about his strength. Many people couldn't understand Gu Zun's train of thought. But Gu Zun only wanted to take revenge with the saber in his hand in an upright and fair manner. Only then would he be able to completely remove his inner demon. As for Yi Guqin, his strength had skyrocketed after obtaining the Sacred Emperor's inheritance. Gu Zun still didn't care. He had absolute confidence in his own strength. Moreover, digesting the Sacred Emperor's inheritance wasn't something that could be accomplished overnight. Yi Guqin couldn't possibly become a peerless expert all of a sudden. Therefore, Gu Zun was willing to take action for the sake of a fair battle to remove his inner demon. Outsiders naturally didn't know what Gu Zun was thinking, so they all thought he was crazy. However, the addition of Gu Zun and Zhao Shinkong only eased the pressure slightly. As time passed and the deadline of 3 days approached, more and more Sky Prides couldn't suppress their greed and ambition and joined the team. On the last day, there were hundreds of Sky Prides taking action. Even with Zhao Shinkong and Gu Zun intimidating them, they couldn't stop this group of people. In the Golden Arena, Yi Guqin's face was frozen as he watched this scene. He couldn't leave the arena, because leaving meant that he had lost the right to receive the inheritance. Therefore, Yi Guqin could only watch as Jian Jinghong, Mu Xingzu and the others were injured because of him. Even with Yi Guqin's cold and reclusive personality, he felt a surge of anger at this moment. His blood seemed to be burning. Finally, Yi Guqin couldn't take it anymore. He took a step forward, his black hair dancing wildly. Words filled with killing intent came out of his mouth. If anyone dares to take action again, I, Yi Guqin, Swear that in 3 days, I will make them pay with blood, pay with their lives. The cold and boundless words were like a sudden clap of thunder that resounded in all directions. All the sky prides froze at the same time. The chilling killing intent emitted by Yi Guqin was like a sharp sword stabbing into their hearts. Chapter 13-14. Fear. That was the only feeling in the hearts of all the sky prides. Yi Guqin was like the god of death. His words sent chills down the spines of all the sky prides. There was no need to elaborate on Yi Guqin's strength. Didn't they see how Gu Xiaoyang died in his hands? Among the hundreds of sky prides who attacked, apart from Huang Qianqiu, Chu Xuanjin, and the others, who else was stronger than Gu Xiaoyang? Yi Guqin's words made the hundreds of sky prides fearful and stop what they were doing. Everyone outside the Holy Emperor world was astonished by what they had just witnessed. One sentence made the hundreds of sky prides not dare to act rashly. Not everyone had such power and influence. This kid has already started to grow. If he doesn't die in the future, his power will probably be comparable to the one emperor and 4 sovereigns. Many important figures of the forces thought that Yi Guqin had already started to have the aura of a sky pride king. The only thing he lacked was experience. After all, Yi Guqin had risen too recently and couldn't be compared to veteran sky prides like Di Haotian, Chu Xuanjin, and Huang Qianqiu. However, one could imagine that after the incident in the sacred imperial world, Yi Guqin's reputation would definitely skyrocket when the news spread. In the sacred imperial world, the sky prides who attacked turned pale and struggled. If they didn't attack, they wouldn't have a chance at all. If they attacked, they would suffer from Yi Guqin's bloody revenge 3 days later. They knew Yi Guqin's character and means. Gu Xiaoyang was a lesson. Yi Guqin would definitely do what he said. The opportunity of the sacred imperial world is precious, but one's life is still more important. That's right. If you lose your life, how can you inherit the opportunity? Even if you get into the arena, you won't be able to defeat Yi Guqin. I'm afraid you won't even be able to take turns. Many sky prides retreated as they were very afraid of Yi Guqin. This scene made Huang Qianqiu, Chu Xuanjin, and the others' pupils constrict. Has he already grown? Huang Qianqiu's heart was cold. Others were afraid of Yi Guqin, but sky prides of their level wouldn't be. Hundreds of geniuses flinched. Even though there were still a few sky prides who were unwilling to give up and continued to attack, they were quickly killed by Jian Jinghong and the others. Outside the golden arena was a sea of scarlet. Blood covered the ground and corpses littered the ground. Yi Guqin heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. If something were to happen to the 10 sword sons because of him, he would feel guilty in his heart. However, there were still people who did not give up. Many people turned to look at Huang Qianqiu and Chu Xuanjin. The battle between geniuses of this level was extremely intense. It was not something that ordinary people could interfere in. It all depends on Huang Qianqiu, Chu Xuanjin, Dao Wuming, and the others. If they can break through and enter the arena, Yi Guqin will be in danger. Everyone was watching, both inside and outside the Holy Imperial Universe. Of course, the most eye-catching person was Huang Qianqiu, because he was the only one of the 4 emperors who had come from the sacred imperial realm. He was almost at the top of the pyramid of geniuses. The strength of the 8th layer of the divine dwelling realm was enough to laugh proudly at the crowd. I didn't expect Duguqioma to be able to last so long in Huang Qianqiu's hands. That's right. I thought he would be defeated very quickly. Everyone's attention shifted to the battle between Huang Qianqiu and Duguqioma. Huang Qianqiu was obviously testing the waters and did not really attack. Duguqioma was the same. However, as time passed, there was only 1 day left before the 3-day deadline. If he did not get serious, he would lose his last chance. Huang Qianqiu's purple hair fluttered, and his purple eyes shone with a cold light. Duguqioma, do you really think you can fight me? I didn't even use much of my strength. Then how do you know that I used all my strength? Duguqioma's lips curled into a cold smile. I'm foolish. Huang Qianqiu snorted. And his strength of the 8th layer of the divine dwelling realm was fully unleashed. He raised his hand, and a huge true chi handprint was formed, pressing down on Duguqioma. It was the great heaven-shattering handprint. 13 Demonic Swords Blood Kill. Duguqioma also activated the leakless divine dwelling in his dantian, and the aura of the 5th layer of the divine dwelling realm exploded. With 10 times the power of his true qi, he was not inferior to Huang Qianqiu, who was at the 8th layer of the divine dwelling realm. He held the god devourer in his hand, and a blood-red sword ray tore through the air. With a loud bang, the sword ray broke through the giant heaven-shattering handprint, and a powerful shock wave shook the surroundings. Giant Vajra handprint. Huang Qianqiu attacked again, and his true qi seemed to have turned into a golden shadow. The shadow raised its hand, and a giant golden handprint was formed. It was like the hand of a Buddha, and it was indestructible. It pressed down on Duguqioma again. 13 Demonic Swords, Vanishing Shadow. Duguqioma's sword momentum condensed. His figure flashed, leaving behind an afterimage. The sword ray was dazzling, and it slammed into the giant Vajra handprint one after another. Huang Qianqiu took the opportunity to attack again. 7 Slashes of the Desolate Heaven, Skybreaking Slash. Huang Qianqiu slashed down with the Desolate God Slash, and the shock wave was so powerful that it made one's heart tremble. 13 Demonic Swords, Burning Star. Duguqioma was like a needle against an awl, and he did not retreat at all. He held the god devourer in his hand, and he used a powerful move to clash with Huang Qianqiu's move. Clang! The ear-piercing sound of metal clashing spread in all directions, and it was as if it wanted to shatter everyone's eardrums. Duguqioma's body shook, and he took a dozen steps back. Huang Qianqiu's blood was boiling in his chest. However, what surprised him even more was that the desolate god slash in his hand was actually buzzing and trembling. It was as if it was emitting a feeling of fear. His sword. Huang Qianqiu's gaze fell on the sword in Duguqioma's hand. The god devourer was wrapped in black crystals. Even a sage would not be able to sense a trace of the primordial demon sword's energy if they did not check carefully, let alone an ordinary person. Huang Qianqiu could not see through it, but he could feel that the weapon in Duguqioma's hand was extraordinary. It's indeed something, but it's still useless. Huang Qianqiu was not too bothered. Although divine weapons were a part of one's strength, one's own strength was still the most important. He took a step forward. Every step he took was as if he was stepping on a drum, and it caused the void to tremble. It was Huang Qianqiu's ultimate movement skill, the 9-step Divine King Stomp. Moreover, it was not just a simple movement skill, as it was also extremely powerful. He stomped down on Duguqioma, as if he wanted to stomp him to death. You're courting death. Duguqioma raised his eyebrows. He was also arrogant and domineering, so how could he endure Huang Qianqiu's humiliation? Burning Star, Cutting Moon, Eclipse Sun. Duguqioma used 3 moves of the 13 demonic swords consecutively. The 3 moves were connected, and the energy waves were extremely powerful. 7 Slashes of Desolate Heaven, Sky-Piercing Slash. Huang Qianqiu slashed down with his sword again, and the mighty sword radiance seemed to pierce through heaven and earth. The collision of the moves caused a huge wave. At the same time, Huang Qianqiu raised his hand without any hesitation, and the golden sequence insignia on the back of his hand shone brightly. I'll defeat you with 1 move. Sword Sect's ultimate move, Boundless Divine Sword. Huang Qianqiu's move was like the wrath of an emperor, and his sword suppressed the mountains, rivers, sun and moon. What a powerful move. Can Duguqioma block it? Seeing this, the crowd was frightened. They knew that Huang Qianqiu was really angry, and he was starting to get serious and use his ultimate move. Just nice. I'll use you as a whetstone to test the power of my self-created sword skill. Duguqioma laughed coldly, and his white hair fluttered. In an instant, a terrifying and piercingly cold aura that was filled with killing intent spread out. Duguqioma was going to use his self-created sword skill. Chapter 13-15. At this moment, Duguqioma's aura was rising steadily. His snow-white hair fluttered wildly in the wind, further accentuating Duguqioma's wild demonic nature. He held the sword with both hands, activating the flawless Azura divine dwelling to the extreme. Blood-red Azura chi gushed out and poured into the god devourer sword. Path of Calamity Demon, Demonic Edge Annihilation Martial. Duguqiomo raised his sword. A pitch-black sword shadow seemed to spread out along with his sword, spreading across the world. An incomparably terrifying storm of sword chi spread out, bringing with it an extremely cold and murderous aura. What a terrifying aura! What sword move is that? It's almost 100% compatible with Duguqioma's aura. Could it be a sword move that he created himself? Some of the heaven prides with slightly better eyesight couldn't help but exclaim. When he used his self-created sword technique, the feeling was different from using other martial arts. There was a natural sense of compatibility. Because it was self-created, no one understood this move better than Duguqioma. How terrifying! Duguqioma can create his own sword move. Many heaven prides trembled in fear. Creating one's own sword technique was not something that anyone could do. Even if they could do it, the power of the self-created sword move wouldn't be that strong. But now, seeing Duguqioma's ultimate move, the powerful ripples caused one's heart to palpitate. Path of Calamity Demon. This was the sword move that Duguqioma had created himself. And it didn't only have one move. Kill. Duguqioma's sword edge vibrated, and the pitch-black sword shadow also burst out at the same time, colliding with Huang Qianqiu's ultimate sword move. Rumble. Like a magnitude 18 earthquake, the ground shook as if on the verge of collapsing. The collision was extremely shocking, and the aftershocks alone were enough to injure a group of divine-dwelling heaven prides. Puchi. And in this collision, both Duguqioma and Huang Qianqiu were injured. Blood flowed from the corner of Duguqioma's mouth, but his expression didn't change in the slightest. Huang Qianqiu took a few steps back, and the disdain in his eyes changed to surprise and seriousness. A self-created sword move? Huang Qianqiu's brows knitted together. Duguqioma's sword move made his heart palpitate. More importantly, Duguqioma's sword move didn't have any defense at all, and it was completely on the path of attack. Path of Calamity Demon, 100 Ghosts Parade. Duguqioma activated his divine abode again, and blood-red true chi surged out. Countless figures of demons and monsters seemed to have appeared in his surroundings, and they roared miserably and miserably, causing the heavens and the earth to transform into a dangerous realm of ghosts. Duguqioma charged forward without any defense. He attacked with all his might, and the surrounding phantoms also charged forward. The move's demonic edge annihilation was. What a powerful move. Duguqioma's move is terrifying. Did you guys notice that Duguqioma's self-created sword moves are all about attacking and killing? He doesn't hold back at all. Many sky prides could tell that Duguqioma's sword move was terrifyingly powerful. Yi Guqin was also watching the battle from the Golden Arena. Interesting. Path of Calamity Demon is indeed very compatible with Duguqioma's fighting style. Yi Guqin muttered to himself. Qioma's sword move didn't hold back at all. It gave up some defense in exchange for 200% of its killing power. Duguqioma was indeed a lunatic. However, considering that he had the talent of the Soul Devourer clan, it was understandable that he had such a crazy personality. As for Yi Guqin, his two self-created sword moves, Emotions of Heaven and Vast Ocean of Sorcerer Mountains, were based on emotions. Strictly speaking, it was Yi Guqin's obsession. It couldn't be considered an orthodox self-created sword move. Dugu's 9 swords was the essence of his self-created unique skill. Qioma, I hope you can surprise me again. Yi Guqin smiled faintly. Creating this doppelganger was the wisest decision he had made. Duguqioma could at least contend with Huang Qianqiu. When the time came, he would be a huge threat to Dihaoyan. On the other side in the battle, Duguqioma attacked recklessly. His 100 Ghosts Parade was extremely powerful. As his sword vibrated, it was as if ghosts were running amok and souls were crying. 7 slashes of desolate heaven, heaven-shaking slash. Huang Qianqiu raised his sword again. With the desolate god slash in his hand, he slashed down. Sword chi surged and the surrounding void vibrated, creating a destructive sword wave. Rumble. As the sword chi collided, the sound of friction could be heard incessantly. Duguqioma's figure was once again pushed back. Although he was injured, the heart in his body was the heart of the Azura Saint King. Therefore, these injuries were nothing to him. Damn it! Huang Qianqiu's face darkened. It wasn't that he was afraid of Dugu begging the devil, he just felt that it would be very troublesome. Furthermore, some of his trump cards were meant to be used against Di Haotian and the other sovereigns. If he were to use them now, it would be disadvantageous to him. The difficulty of Dugu Qiuemo far exceeded his expectations. It seems like Huang Qianqiu won't be able to do anything to Dugu Qiuema for the time being. Tisk Tsk. I didn't expect that Yi Guqin and Dugu Qiuema would emerge at the same time from the Holy Emperor universe. Many talents were discussing. There was no doubt about Yi Guqin's performance. He was the most dazzling existence in the Holy Imperial universe. On the other hand, Dugu Qiuema's performance was not weak either. Now he was even able to fight against Huang Qianqiu, one of the four sovereigns. His performance was second only to Yi Guqin. Some people even thought that if Dugu Qiuema used his full strength, he might not be weaker than Yi Guqin. As time passed, the entire Holy Imperial universe suddenly shook. Then, a bright light shone and golden clouds filled the sky. A resplendent light pillar pierced through the sky and landed on the golden arena. Shit. Damn it. Huang Qianqiu Chu Xuanjin, and the others looked terrible. A mighty voice reverberated in the void. 3 days have passed. The one standing on the arena will receive my inheritance. Yi Guqin felt as if he was bathing in the warm sunlight. Then Yi Guqin's body floated up and disappeared in the golden light. Where's Yi Guqin? Why is he missing? He must have gone to receive the sacred emperor's inheritance. Seeing Yi Guqin's figure disappear from the golden arena, many geniuses discussed. Damn it. Boom. Huang Qianqiu swung his sword casually and plowed 100-foot-long crack in the ground. His eyes were incomparably cold as he stared at Dugu Qiuema and said, "This matter is not over yet." Huang Qianqiu wanted to use his true strength to kill Dugu Qiuema. However, the price he had to pay would not be small, and he would expose his trump card. He valued the battle at Sky Burial Island very much, and even wanted to surpass Di Haotian. Therefore, he could only hold back for now. Chu Xuanjin, Dao Wuming, Wan and the others also looked terrible. The sacred emperor's inheritance had slipped away under their noses. As for those who were on Yi Guqin's side, they only wished him well. They were also very curious about how strong Yi Guqin, who was already very strong, would become after receiving the inheritance of the Holy Emperor. Chapter 13-16. Everyone was discussing Yi Guqin's disappearance, both inside and outside the sacred imperial realm. Yi Guqin himself had arrived at a strange place. This was a paradise that resembled a paradise. Spirit qi was steaming, and white mist was dense. There was a grass hut in front of a pond. A scholarly man in a straw raincoat was fishing quietly by the pond. Yi Guqin had a strange look in his eyes. He knew that he had passed the test and could receive the sacred emperor's inheritance. However, this was a little different from what he had imagined when he inherited the sage emperor's legacy. He slowly walked into the pond. The scholarly man in the straw raincoat was holding a fishing rod and casting it forward. In an instant, Yi Guqin's heart skipped a beat. In a trance, Yi Guqin seemed to see a peerless powerhouse slashing out with his sword. Tens of thousands of sword shadows converged together, fusing into a heaven-piercing sword that traversed the heavens for tens of thousands of miles, stirring up millions of winds and clouds. This technique. Yi Guqin took a deep breath. That was not all. The scholarly man in the straw raincoat cast the fishing rod a second time. The scene before Yi Guqin seemed to have changed again. A huge pure qi sword seemed to have descended from the heavens. It was like the judgment of a god. Then the scholarly man cast the fishing rod a third time. The scene before Yi Guqin changed again. It was as if all the swords in the world were gathering toward the supreme expert. Then, all the swords attacked at the same time, breaking the divine shield. After casting the fishing rod 3 times, the scholarly man finally stopped moving. Yi Guqin came to his senses. There was still some shock in his eyes. He walked up to the scholarly man and cupped his fist slightly. "Thank you, senior." "Oh, what are you thanking me for?" The scholarly man turned his head, and his deep eyes seemed to contain 2 small worlds. "Thank you for teaching me, senior," Yi Guqin said. Interesting. As expected of someone who can make a lotus sprout 50 leaves. You didn't disappoint me. If you can't even comprehend these 3 moves, even if you can reach this stage, I won't let you obtain the inheritance. The scholarly man smiled faintly. As expected, Yi Guchen thought to himself. It was not easy to obtain the sacred emperor's inheritance. In the end, he had to get the approval of the master of the sacred imperial world. The 3 moves I used just now were a saint-level sword art, the 10,000 sword divine technique. There are 3 moves in total. First move, Myriad Truths Annihilation. Second style, Myriad Attraction Heavenly Tree. The third style, Myriad Swords Greeting the Ancestor. This is the first inheritance I'm going to give you. Yi Guchen was shocked to hear this. The various martial arts levels were divided into acquired, innate, spirit, king, and emperor levels. Above the emperor-level sword arts were the saint-level sword arts. This was something even more powerful than an emperor-level sword art. However, saint-level martial arts were too rare. Even in the overlord-level forces, they were the absolute core. It was impossible to have many of them. Moreover, saint-level sword arts were much more difficult to cultivate than emperor-level sword arts. If one wasn't a true genius, it would be difficult to cultivate saint-level sword arts. Even if one forced themselves to cultivate it, it was difficult to comprehend the essence of it. However, Yi Guchen belonged to the category of people with monstrous talent. Therefore, he was able to quickly comprehend the 3 sword moves. Moreover, Yi Guchen noticed that this was only the first inheritance. Next, I'll give you the second opportunity. The scholarly man spoke faintly and waved his hand casually. Instantly, countless golden drops fell like rain and merged into Yi Guchen's body. Yi Guchen immediately felt countless pure spiritual qi surging into his divine dwellings. His cultivation base also began to loosen. It's up to you how much you can break through after the spiritual qi empowerment this time, the scholarly man said. Rumble. Thunder rumbled in Yi Guchen's divine dwellings. His cultivation base began to rise and rose directly to the 5th layer of the divine dwelling. Then it continued to rise and broke through to the 6th layer of the divine dwelling. In the divine dwelling stage, every breakthrough required a huge amount of resources and spiritual qi. During this period, Yi Guchen broke through 2 layers in succession and reached the 6th layer of the divine dwelling. This was unimaginable for the heaven prides of the outside world. Not only that, the pure spiritual qi continued to pour into Yi Guchen's body. But this time, Yi Guchen began to suppress it, unwilling to let himself continue to break through. This was because he wanted to transform his divine dwelling into a world-level divine dwelling. He still needed to pass through the remaining 2 tribulations, so that he could break through in the most perfect state. Therefore, before this, Yi Guchen did not intend to break through to the Heavenly Palace Venerable stage. But this did not prevent him from receiving the spiritual qi empowerment. Yi Guchen compressed the spiritual qi energy and stored it in his body. When he needed to break through to the Heavenly Palace Venerable stage, the spiritual qi energy would erupt again and help him break through to the Venerable stage. TSK, what an ambitious little guy. What a surprise. The scholarly man smiled. He did not expect Yi Guchen to make such a choice. If it were other heaven prides, they would definitely not be able to resist this temptation and desperately want to break through. It was impossible for them to be as rational as Yi Guchen. In the end, the spiritual qi empowerment ended, and Yi Guchen's cultivation base stopped at the 6th layer of the divine dwelling stage. However, there was an extremely vigorous energy stored within his body. This spiritual qi energy would be of great help to him when he was preparing to break through to the Venerable stage. Thank you, Elder. Yi Guchen sincerely thanked him. The scholarly man smiled. Don't be in a hurry to thank me, the inheritance is not over yet. Is there more? Even with Yi Guchen's calm temperament, it was inevitable that he would be overjoyed at this moment. He finally understood why all the geniuses were so eager to obtain the succession of the sacred emperor. The spiritual qi empowerment and the saint-level sword art. Any one of them could make a group of heaven prides go crazy. However, these 2 opportunities were actually not all of them. Look at the pond. The scholarly man suddenly said. Yi Guchen shifted his gaze to the pond, and saw that there were 5 lotus flowers floating above the pond. These 5 lotus flowers were translucent, as clear as crystals, and they reflected 7-colored radiance. They were obviously not ordinary lotus flowers. This is... Even though Yi Guqin was experienced and knowledgeable, he could not recognize them for a moment. This is a top sacred medicine, the soul-drawing lotus. It is very beneficial for the cultivation of the soul and the primordial spirit. If you break through to the heavenly palace venerable stage in the future, the energy of the soul-drawing lotus can also help you form the soul palace, the scholarly man said. I see. Yi Guqin took a deep breath. The value of each of these 5 soul-drawing lotuses was not inferior to the Enlightenment ancient tree. Take it. The scholarly man waved his hand. Yi Guqin nodded slightly and stepped forward to pluck the soul-drawing lotuses. He safely plucked all 4 soul-drawing lotuses. However, when he was about to pluck the 5th soul-drawing lotus, he encountered a resistance. Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly and exerted force to pull it out. He suddenly found that there was a lotus root growing under the soul-drawing lotus. This is... Yi Guqin's eyes narrowed. Chapter 13-17. This lotus root was shaped like a human, and similarly had a torso and 4 limbs. It looked just like a human-shaped lotus root. Most importantly, Yi Guqin sensed an extremely astonishing life aura on this human-shaped lotus root. He even had an illusion that as long as he took a bite of this human-shaped lotus root, any injury could be directly healed. This lotus root is... Yi Guqin had doubts in his heart. Seeing the situation, the scholarly man said with a smile, apart from the 5 soul-guiding lotuses, this divine life lotus root is considered a life-saving item for you. After all, you obtained my inheritance. I can't let you fall at will. Divine life lotus root? Yi Guqin was puzzled. Even he had never heard of this name before. The scholarly man explained with a faint smile. This divine life lotus root is rich in life essence, and has the effect of curing the dead, healing bones, and even has the ability to reconstruct the physical body. It can barely be considered a half-divine medicine. Reconstruct the physical body, half-divine medicine? Yi Guqin's pupils shook when he heard that. He was really shocked. Above top-grade holy medicines were divine medicines, and half-divine medicines were existences close to divine medicines. However, looking at the entire Nantian region, forget about divine medicines, even half-divine medicines were virtually extinct already. Even among overlord-class factions, one could not find more than a few half-divine medicines. Yi Guqin did not expect that he could actually still obtain such a precious half-divine medicine. However, this divine life lotus root had the heaven-defying medicinal effect of curing the dead, healing bones, and reconstructing the physical body. Being treated as a half-divine medicine was not an exaggeration. Senior, this is too precious. Even Yi Guqin also felt that the things he obtained were not too generous. Heh. These things are already useless to me. Leaving them here is merely a waste. The scholarly man did not care at all. Oh right, I haven't called Senior's name yet? Yi Guqin said. Taking so many benefits from him, and not even knowing his name was too rude. My name is Thousand Leaves. Thousand Leaves Saint Emperor said with a faint smile. Many thanks, Senior Thousand Leaves, Yi Guqin said. 5 soul-guiding lotuses and 1 divine life lotus root. That was equivalent to 5 top-grade saintly herbs and 1 demigod herb. Even saints would be envious and want to seize it. The thousand-leaf Saint Emperor glanced at Yi Guqin and said, Little fellow, are you still waiting for the so-called realm inheritance? Yi Guqin was taken aback. Then he replied, Senior, the opportunity you gave me is already generous enough. I don't have the qualifications to ask for more. What Yi Guqin said was indeed the truth. He was sincere and sincere. He was not just being polite. Although the legacy of a domain was precious, Yi Guqin had already obtained enough. He was not a greedy person. Yes, he could accept that. He didn't, and he wouldn't be dissatisfied because of this. Haha. I can tell you that after reaching the Saint Emperor level, there is no such thing as a realm. No domain? Yi Guqin was puzzled. He knew that Saint Kings all had their own bounded domains. For example, the Azura Sage King's Yellow Springs Blood River, and the vast Star Sage King's vast star realm. Why was there no such thing as a Saint Emperor? Or in other words, the bounded domain has already transformed into another kind of existence, the Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor said with a smile. Another kind of existence. Yi Guqin was lost in thought for a moment. Then, a flash of inspiration suddenly appeared in his mind. Could it be? The Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor's eyes were filled with admiration. He nodded slightly and said, "Looks like you've already thought of it." "That's right. In fact, all of you have already stepped into my bounded domain." Yi Guqin's mind shook. It was as if lightning had flashed across his mind. The entire Saint Emperor world was actually a transformed bounded domain. I can tell you that Saint Kings merge their soul palaces and divine dwellings to form a bounded domain. As for Saint Emperors, they can turn their own domain into a miniature world. For example, the Saint Emperor's world was transformed from my previous domain, Yi Futian continued. The Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor explained. Yi Guqin's mind was instantly enlightened. It was as if a path had been opened before his eyes. His path of cultivation towards the Saint Realm also gradually became clearer. The Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor was letting Yi Guqin understand the cultivation method of the Saint Realm in advance. Thank you for answering my questions, Senior. Yi Guqin clasped his hands solemnly. This kind of cultivation experience was too important to him. This was equivalent to letting Yi Guqin understand the direction of cultivation in the future. Alright, with your current cultivation, you are still far from being able to refine and control the entire Saint Emperor world. Therefore, I cannot directly pass it on to you. However, I can give you a core of the Saint Emperor world. In the future, when your cultivation level and strength have increased, you can try to come back and take the Saint Emperor world. The Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor said and waved one hand. A golden lotus floated into Yi Guqin's hand. Is this the core of the Saint Emperor world? Yi Guqin murmured. Right now he did not have the ability to control the Saint Emperor world. However, in the future, when Yi Guqin's strength increased, he could use this core to take over the entire Saint Emperor world. The Saint Emperor world is rich in power. If you have the ability in the future, you can even refine the entire Saint Emperor world into a treasure. When the time comes, you can use it as a means of attack to crush a small world. You can imagine its power. The Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor said. Yi Guqin was speechless when he heard this. These battles between the Divine Palace and Heavenly Palace levels were still using moves. However, Saint Emperor level experts could create a small world with a single hand. These were two different levels of battle. Although the Saint King level domains were strong, they paled in comparison to a small world. They could not be mentioned in the same breath. The only pity was that Yi Guqin was still unable to control the Saint Emperor world. Alright, all the inheritance is here. I hope you can go all the way. Don't die halfway. The Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor smiled warmly. I will do my best, Yi Guqin said. He was not weak to begin with. After receiving the inheritance, he would be able to improve greatly. Among his peers, Yi Guqin no longer had to fear anyone. By the way, Little Fishy is a little arrogant. You may not be able to make him submit wholeheartedly with your current strength, but he will help you out on my account. If you have enough strength in the future, you can make him listen to your orders, the Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor suddenly said. Little Fishy? Yi Guqin was puzzled at first, but then he suddenly came to his senses. The little fishy that the Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor spoke of should be the Dark North King Beimiao. A Dark North King with a rare bloodline, and incomparably powerful strength was called Little Fishy by the Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor. This made Yi Guqin a little speechless. However, he also knew that the Dark North King would not listen to him. It was impossible for the Dark North King to listen to him with the strength of the Divine Dwelling stage. However, Yi Guqin did not care. It was enough as long as the Dark North King was willing to help him out on account of the Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor. At this moment, the Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor's gaze fell on the back of Yi Guqin's hand. He frowned slightly and said, You are also a 9th-generation Sword Sect Echelon disciple, right? Yi Guqin nodded slightly, but at the same time his heart skipped a beat. From the Thousand-Leaf Saint Emperor's expression, could he have some past with the Sword Sect? Chapter 1318. Senior Thousand Leaf, is there a problem? Yi Guqian asked. Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor shook his head lightly and said, Nothing, I just want to warn you about something. What is it? Yi Guqian asked. The 8th generation sword master cannot be trusted, Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor said. The 8th generation sword master, Yi Tianxing? Yi Guqian raised his brows. To be honest, Yi Guqian had a pretty good impression of Yi Tianxing. Previously in the Saint Origin dynasty, he had seen the 8th generation sword master's consciousness clone in the heavenly law sword realm. It was a middle-aged man with an ordinary face that was so ordinary that it seeped into his bones. However, he became the 8th generation sword master with an ordinary body. Clearly, he had experienced unimaginable hardships and setbacks. In the end, he defeated the other sword master echelon cultivators to truly become the 8th generation sword master. Moreover, Yi Tianxing's character was also calm and easy to approach. He did not have the arrogance of an expert. He even passed down the 108,000 sword souls to Yi Guqian. Therefore, Yi Guqian had a pretty good impression of Yi Tianxing. However, Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor said that Yi Tianxing could not be trusted now? What did this mean? Seeing the doubt in Yi Guqian's eyes, Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor said indifferently, Why? Could it be that you have seen the 8th generation sword master? I once received his inheritance in a secret realm. Yi Guqian said truthfully. I see. Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor nodded slightly. May I know why Senior said this? Is there a secret behind it? Yi Guqian asked. Actually it doesn't matter. I just said it casually. Just keep it in your heart, Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor said. Yi Guqian nodded slightly. He knew that Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor would not tell him more. It was useless even if he interrogated. Alright, the inheritance is over. You can leave. Remember, don't die easily and let me down, Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor said. Yes, thank you for the inheritance, Senior Thousand Leaf. Yi Guqian cupped his hands slightly. Then, a golden beam of light descended and enveloped Yi Guqian's figure. His entire person disappeared from the spot. The Thousand Leaves Saint Emperor sighed softly and said, The chaos has begun. Where should the 9 regions go? Yi Tianxing, I hope you don't go to extremes. The changes of the heavenly Tao, the actions of the heavenly Tao. This is the origin of your name, Yi Tianxing. But how can the fate of the heavenly Tao and the 9 regions be decided by you? The Thousand Leaf Saint Emperor sighed slightly with a deep look in his eyes. It was as if he could see the chaos of the 9 zones in the future. At the same time, in the sacred imperial world, many golden pillars of light descended from the sky and enveloped every single genius. The holy imperial universe is closing. Many sky prides came to their senses. In the next moment, all the geniuses disappeared from the golden pillar of light and were teleported out of the holy imperial world. At the same time, a vast and majestic voice came from the horizon and resounded in everyone's ears. From now on, the holy imperial world will be completely closed. All the bigwigs outside the holy imperial world were shocked to hear this. What does this mean? The holy imperial world will never be able to open again? Why is this happening? It must be Yi Guqian. He must have received the holy emperor's inheritance. That's why the holy imperial world will be closed forever. Some bigwigs guessed right away. Only when Yi Guqian received the holy emperor's inheritance would the holy imperial world be closed forever. Many of the bigwigs' expressions changed at the thought of this. It was rumored that the immemorial demonic sword, God Eater, was in Yi Guqian's hands. Now the holy emperor's inheritance was in his hands as well. Yi Guqian could be said to be in high demand. Everyone wanted to suppress him and seize his opportunity and inheritance. Damn it! Huang Qianqiu and the others were enraged. They were also teleported out of the holy imperial world. Huang Qianqiu's liver ached at the thought of losing the holy emperor's inheritance. He stared coldly at Duguqiuma, who was not far away from him. If Duguqiuma hadn't stopped him, he would have received the holy emperor's inheritance. Just as Huang Qianqiu was about to attack Duguqiuma, Wan'er flashed and stood next to Duguqiuma. She smiled at Huang Qianqiu and said, Huang Qianqiu, since the result is out, there's no need for you to fight anymore, is there? Oh, you're helping him? Could it be that the demonic sect of devastation wants him? Huang Qianqiu's expression darkened. The two people he wanted to get rid of the most were Yi Guqin and Du Guqiuma. Haha. Wan'er only smiled, but she also revealed her attitude. As for the rest of the Sky Prides, each of them had a look of pity on their faces. After all, who didn't want the Holy Emperor's inheritance? Humph, even if Yi Guqin can get the Holy Emperor's inheritance, he won't be able to leave safely today. Chu Xuanzhen's expression was cold. He wasn't the only one who thought so. The other geniuses thought the same. Yi Guqin had a great time killing in the Holy Imperial World. However, now that the Holy Imperial World was over, Yi Guqin had to face the Overlord forces. Would they be willing to do nothing when their geniuses were all killed? Obviously not. And the Sword Dynasty was not enough to stop Yi Guqin. Just as all the forces were having the same thought, a dazzling beam of light fell from the void again. A figure in a black robe appeared from it. The pillar of light dissipated, and the figure of a handsome young man with black hair and a black robe appeared from within. It was Yi Guqin. Die, you bastard! At the moment when Yi Guqin's figure appeared, a big hand condensed by starlight rushed toward him to kill him. It was the 7th Star Lord of the Starry Sword Pavilion. He said that he wanted to kill Yi Guqin, but in fact he wanted to capture Yi Guqin first, and then force him to hand over the immemorial demon sword, and the Holy Emperor's inheritance. 7th Star Lord, you've gone too far. Wu Hongyan from the Sword Dynasty was the first to lose her patience. She had taken the fruit of saintly way before. Although she didn't reach the Saint Realm the first time, she did reach the Saint Realm after cultivating. Now she and Confuzi were both saints of the tribulation. Wu Hongyan waved her hand. Her vigorous genuine qi shook the void and collided with the starlight hand. The void trembled and was about to be destroyed. Sword Dynasty, how dare you interfere? The 7th Star Lord was furious. He walked out of the endless starlight. He was a middle-aged man in a starry robe. His eyes seemed to be filled with endless starlight. The 7th Star Lord finally showed his true face. No matter what, he's still the Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty. Moreover, we're only halfway through the battlefield of prodigies. The battle on Sky Burial Island hasn't started yet. Are you going to break the rules? Confuzi also stepped out. He held his cane and his white beard fluttered. He looked like a sleeping lion that had just woken up. Wu Hongyan and Confuzi both released their saint aura to face the 7th Star Lord. All the people from the various forces were dumbfounded. They didn't expect the Sword Dynasty to stand up for Yi Guqin. After all, although the Sword Dynasty was strong, the Starry Sword Pavilion was even more untouchable. If they weren't careful, they might bring about the destruction of their country. The number of dynasties that were wiped out by Overlord-class forces wasn't small. Chapter 1319. Wu Hongyan and Confuzi stepped forward. Yi Guqin sighed in his heart. He did not choose the wrong dynasty. The sacrifices he made for the Sword Dynasty were worth it. If it were another dynasty, they might not have cared about him. They might even push him to the Overlord-level forces for benefits. Are you serious? The 7th Star Lord's eyes were extremely cold. That one sentence seemed to freeze the heavens and the earth. Everyone felt a biting chill. Provoking Overlord-level forces was not a wise choice. Confuzi and Wu Hongyan frowned, but they did not retreat. Good, very good. It seems that the Sword Dynasty has a half-step Saint King. You don't even care about the Starry Sword Pavilion. The 7th Star Lord was so angry that he laughed. At this time, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion Saint, the golden-robed elder, also said, Yi Guqin is indeed very murderous. We need to restrain him. Everyone was shocked. They did not expect the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion to get involved. Then the Heavenly God Sword Sect Saint spoke again. This saint was no ordinary person. Like the 7th Star Lord, he was also a saint who had appeared in the Tianhuang Plains. Sword Saint Donglu asked Donglu. Back then, he and the 7th Star Lord wanted to seize the immemorial demon sword. In the end, it was Yi Guqin who got it. Now that Yi Guqin finally appeared, he would not let go of this opportunity. Many people were puzzled as to how Yi Guqin could survive. But the most important thing now was obviously the immemorial demon sword, and the Saint Emperor's inheritance. Nothing else mattered. Seeing the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, and the Heavenly God Sword sect intervening, Wu Hongyan and Confucius' expressions were extremely ugly. Just facing the Starry Sword Pavilion alone was enough to make them feel powerless, not to mention the addition of 2 more Overlord-class forces. As for the rest of the factions, such as the Divine Battle Saber sect, the Demonic Extermination sect, etc., even though they had yet to express their thoughts, it was obvious that they were planning to target Yi Guqin too. Heh. Is this the attitude of an overlord force? Didn't I say before that I don't care about life and death in the sacred emperor world? Now you want to blame their deaths on me? Yi Guqin's lips curled into a cold smile. This was the rule of the Battle of Prodigies. As long as one participated, it meant that one had no regard for life or death. However, the 7th Star Lord and the others were trying to blame him for the deaths of Gu Xiaoyang and the others. It could even be said that Yi Guqin was murderous. Yi Guqin, you are too crazy. You have been like this since the Tianhuang Plains. If Di Haoyan had not held back, do you really think you could have hurt him? When Donglu said indifferently. Hearing this, some people's eyes flickered. Could it be that Di Hao really held back at that time? Yi Guqin sneered when he heard this. Perhaps Di Haoyan did have a trump card. However, at that time, Yi Guqin had used Borrowing Sword from Heaven, which was obviously beyond Di Haoyan's expectations. He had already defended with all his strength, but he had underestimated the power of Borrowing Sword from Heaven, which was why he had been severely injured. Why did Wen Donglu say that Di Haoyan had held back? You can ask Di Haoyan about the truth. Why do you have to lie to protect his face? Yi Guqin said disdainfully. You. When Donglio's face darkened. Seeing Yi Guqin going head-to-head with a saint, the rest of the people were speechless. Yi Guqin was indeed worthy of being the one who had stirred up endless storms. How many young prodigies dared to go head-to-head with a saint from an overlord force like him? What a sharp-tongued brat. In that case, I'll capture you first. The 7th Star Lord, Wen Donglu, and the others couldn't help but want to directly suppress Yi Guqin. However, at that moment, a faint laughter suddenly sounded. A tall and mighty man in a gray robe broke through the void, and appeared in front of Yi Guqin like an iron wall. Everyone, I'm afraid it's not very good to bully a junior like this. Seeing the sudden appearance of the figure, everyone's eyes converged on him. Some of the heavenly tribulation saints frowned as they felt a great pressure from the faint pressure that was being emitted. The newcomer was the leader of the Swordway Alliance, Proud Divine Prefecture. Proud Divine Prefecture, your cultivation. When Donglu raised his eyebrows. Haha, I just broke through some time ago and just reached the Saint King realm. Proud Divine Prefecture stood with his hands behind his back, his face indifferent. However, this sentence caused many of the important figures of the various forces to gasp in shock. Just reached the Saint King realm. It was easy to say, but the difference between a saint and a Saint King was like heaven and earth. If the Sword Dynasty only had a saint, then at most, it would only be slightly valued by the Overlord forces. However, if there was a Saint King expert, then even the Overlord forces would not dare to underestimate it, and would treat it seriously. After all, a Saint Ruler was a leader even in an Overlord-level force. Proud Divine Prefecture has broken through to the Saint King realm. The Sword Dynasty's strength has increased. TSK, I thought the Sword Dynasty would be bullied, but now that Proud Divine Prefecture has broken through to the Saint King realm, I'm afraid it won't be that easy for the Starry Sword Pavilion to suppress the Sword Dynasty. That's not necessarily true. The Sword Dynasty will definitely not dare to fight the Starry Sword Pavilion head-on. It's not like the Starry Sword Pavilion doesn't have a Saint King expert. There were sounds of discussion from all directions. The arrival of Proud Divine Prefecture could be said to be a stabilizing force, which made Confuzi and Wu Hongyan feel relieved. What surprised them even more was that Proud Divine Prefecture had broken through to the Saint King realm. Yi Guqin was not too surprised. Proud Divine Prefecture had been a half-step Saint King before, so it was only a matter of time before it broke through to the Saint King realm. Now the 7th Star Lord, Wen Donglu, and the others were in a difficult position. because they could not suppress proud divine prefecture. The seventh star lord's expression was uncertain. Proud divine prefecture. You have to understand. Do you really want to go against us overlords? We will not let that Yi Guqin go. Proud divine prefecture's expression did not change. My sword dynasty does not want to go against you, but Yi Guqin is my sword dynasty's Jiankui. Moreover, killing someone in the Saint Emperor realm does not seem to be the responsibility, does it? Proud divine prefecture's words made the seventh star lord and the others speechless. Because that was the rule. They just wanted to suppress Yi Guqin. At this time, Elder Qing Song of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion stood up and said, I think it is not appropriate to deal with Yi Guqin now. He did not do anything wrong. You are just doing this because of old grudges. An overlord-level force is actually speaking up for Yi Guqin? Some people revealed a strange look. Jun Xiaoyao's lips curled into a faint smile. He knew that Elder Qing Song would not be indifferent. Yi Guqin was not surprised. He had helped Jun Xiaorao before, so the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion would not be stingy with their kindness. Moreover, the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion and the Starry Sword Pavilion had a grudge against each other. Even if it was just to annoy the Starry Sword Pavilion, they would be happy to do it. However, Yi Guqin was taken aback by the support of another force. Chapter 1320. A beautiful woman in a cheongsam from the Misty Sword Pavilion stood out and said, I also think that it's not a good idea to attack Yi Guqin now. Wouldn't that break the rules of the Battle of Geniuses? Besides, with Yi Guqin's strength, he'll definitely shine in the Battle of Zongtian Island and become the main force against the Dark World's geniuses. This beautiful woman was a saint from the Misty Sword Pavilion and the leader of the team this time. What's going on? Even the Misty Sword Pavilion wants to protect Yi Guqin? It's strange. The Luo Fu Sword Pavilion spoke because Yi Guqin saved Jun Xiaoyao, but the Misty Sword Pavilion doesn't seem to have anything to do with Yi Guqin. Many people were confused. Not to mention them, even Yi Guqin himself was a little surprised. He didn't seem to have much connection with the Misty Sword Pavilion, except, Yi Guqin thought for a while, and turned his eyes to the beautiful woman in a moon-white dress with a mole at the corner of her eye. Yi Songyue. As if she felt Yi Guqin's gaze, Yi Songyue's eyelashes fluttered and she looked away. The beautiful woman from the Misty Sword Pavilion looked at Yi Songyue and muttered in her heart, I didn't expect Songyue to send me a voice transmission and ask me to help Yi Guqin out of this predicament. She wouldn't have taken a fancy to this kid, right? However, the beautiful woman thought that Yi Guqin was indeed very outstanding. But now he was in the teeth of the storm. It was uncertain whether he could survive in the end. Seeing that the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion and the Misty Sword Pavilion stood out to speak for Yi Guqin, the Seventh Star Master and Wendonglu were even more gloomy. The proud divine continent was already troublesome enough. Now these two overlord forces were helping Yi Guqin. It was undoubtedly more difficult for them to attack Yi Guqin. However, at this moment, a giant hand branded with countless starlight runes broke through the space and grabbed at Yi Guqin. This giant hand had an extremely strong aura. It seemed that even a tribulation saint couldn't resist the suppression of this giant hand. What a terrifying aura. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air in the face of this starry giant hand that broke through space and suddenly appeared. It was clear that the master of the starry hand was located far away and had unleashed such a powerful attack through space. It's the third star lord. The seventh star lord was shocked. He recognized the person who had attacked. It was the third star lord of the Starry Sword Pavilion, a 6th level Heavenly Tribulation Realm Peak Sage King expert. Oh, the third star lord, he's made a move. Wendonglu and the saints of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion were surprised. The third star lord was an absolute powerhouse at the peak of the Saint Ruler realm. He could look down on the entire South Horizon region. The proud divine continent's expression also turned slightly cold. He also felt the tremendous power contained in the giant hand of stars. The third astral lord was at the 6th level of the Heavenly Tribulation realm, a peak saint king. And now, even if the proud divine continent broke through, it was only at the 4th level of the Heavenly Tribulation realm. In the Heavenly Tribulation realm, The difference between each realm was huge. It was even greater than the difference between the previous realm. Therefore, facing the giant hand of stars, even the proud divine continent was under great pressure. This is the foundation of an overlord-level force. There are stronger experts casually making a move. The Sword Dynasty has no choice but to admit defeat. I didn't expect that even the third Star Lord would make a move. If the Saint Emperor doesn't make a move, who can stop his strength? Even the proud divine continent would have a hard time. Seeing the giant hand of stars pressing down on the proud divine continent in Yi Guqian, the crowd was filled with emotions. What was an overlord-level force? This was an overlord-level force. Wu Hongyan, Confuzi, and the others' hearts were in their mouths. They were extremely nervous. Elder Qing Song and the beautiful woman from the Misty Sword Pavilion saw this, and secretly shook their heads and sighed. It wasn't that they didn't want to help, but there was nothing they could do now. At least the big shots behind them hadn't made a move yet. Yi Guqian stared at the giant hand of stars. It was as if a part of the sky was pressing down on him, making him feel suffocated. I swear that in the future, I will destroy the Starry Sword Pavilion with my own hands. Yi Guqian swore in his heart. He didn't want others to bully him in such a domineering way. Just as the giant hand of stars was about to press down on the proud divine continent and Yi Guqian, a lazy and helpless voice sounded faintly. I still have to make a move. As the voice sounded, a blue-robed figure suddenly appeared. It was a man with an incomparably handsome face. His long, dark blue hair fluttered in the wind, sprinkling specks of light. His blue eyes were as deep as the sea, unfathomable. It was the Dark North monarch, Bei Miao. Bei Miao looked at the incoming giant hand of stars and waved his hand indifferently. Suddenly, it was as if tens of thousands of waves were surging in the void. Endless waves surged in the void and collided with the giant hand of stars, annihilating each other. A faint puzzled voice came from the space broken by the giant hand of stars. Obviously, it was the third Star Lord who was far away. He didn't expect someone to be able to block his attack. Who are you? Are you protecting that bastard? The seventh Star Lord's face was as cold as frost. He also didn't expect someone to be able to block the third Star Lord's attack. However, when he heard the word bastard, Bei Miao's calm and handsome face suddenly turned cold. Because his true form was a Luoquan, strictly speaking, he was also a monster. The word bastard was very sensitive to monsters. I hate that word. Bei Miao's tone was cold as he stepped into the void. Ripples appeared in the void. He waved his hand, and a long river of mystic essence heavy water appeared, as if even the sky was about to collapse. That's the mystic essence heavy water. Is he that Luoquan? Everyone was stunned when they saw the mystic essence heavy water appear. Some of the big shots immediately remembered the Luoquan that had briefly appeared in the realm of weak water. That was the Luoquan that had swallowed Yi Guqian. Who would have thought that the Luoquan could leave the sacred emperor realm? That was beyond everyone's expectation. You're that Luoquan. The seventh Star Lord also came to his senses, but it was too late. The mystic essence heavy water was already pressing down. The seventh Star Lord raised his hand, an endless starlight sword, shaking the void and turning into a star seal. Boom. There was a loud noise. The seventh Star Lord spat out blood, and retreated more than 300 meters. His clothes were dyed red with blood. Everyone fell silent when they saw that the seventh Star Lord had been injured. Then they all looked at Bei Miao. That Luoquan was actually so strong. If it weren't for the fact that killing you would cause some trouble, I wouldn't mind erasing you. Bei Miao said indifferently. The seventh Star Lord's face was gloomy and pale. As the seventh Star Lord, it was the first time he had been humiliated like that in public. It made him feel aggrieved and resentful. He couldn't wait to fight to his heart's content. However, he couldn't defeat Bei Miao, so he could only suppress his anger. Seeing the situation, when Donglu and the saints of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion wisely chose to remain silent. They didn't want to embarrass themselves like the seventh Star Lord. Chapter 1321. The Saint Realm experts of some overlord powers looked at Bei Miao with heavy gazes. They all knew that Bei Miao's true form was a Kuan. Although he was now a rank 8 demon emperor, he should be about as strong as a human tribulation saint. But because Beimiao's true form was a Kuran, a primordial species, he was much stronger than ordinary monsters. So ordinary tribulation saints couldn't fight against Beimiao. Even saint rulers wouldn't have an easy time dealing with Beimiao. Why is this Kuan protecting Yi Guchen? That's right. I saw him swallow Yi Guchen in one gulp. What's going on? Many people couldn't figure it out. They didn't know that Beimiao was a pet of Thousand Leaves Saint Emperor. And Yi Guchen, as the successor of Thousand Leaves Saint Emperor, should be Beimiao's master. But with Yi Guchen's current strength, Beimiao obviously wouldn't submit to him, and wouldn't take him seriously. But seeing that Yi Guchen had received Thousand Leaves Saint Emperor's inheritance, Beimiao wouldn't be indifferent. Thank you, Senior Beimiao. Yi Guchen cupped his hands at Beimiao. No matter what Beimiao's attitude towards him was, at least he was willing to help him get out of his predicament. This was a favor. Hearing Yi Guchen's address, Beimiao's expression calmed down a little. At least Yi Guchen knew his place and didn't talk to him as a master. Otherwise, Beimiao would absolutely flick his sleeves and leave without stopping in the slightest. No need to thank me. At least I have my freedom, Beimiao said indifferently. When he talked to Yi Guchen, he didn't call him king to express his attitude. And there was another reason why he helped. Yi Guchen had indirectly given him freedom. Beimiao could finally leave the Saint Emperor world and obtain his freedom. Hearing the conversation between Beimiao and Yi Guchen, many people present still didn't understand the relationship between the two. However, he also knew that Beimiao would protect Yi Guchen. This is going to be troublesome. When Donglu of the Heavenly God Sword Sect and the Saint of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion both frowned. Originally, the proud divine continent was already difficult to deal with. Now there was another Beimiao. With the current situation, it was impossible to deal with Yi Guchen without a saint ruler. Should he give up just like that? To be honest, the Seventh Star Lord and the others were absolutely unwilling to give up. The Sage Emperor's inheritance was one thing, but the immemorial demon sword was something no overlord could remain indifferent to. Yi Guchen had also thought of this point. His eyes flashed as he nonchalantly said, I know what you are thinking. You want to know the whereabouts of the immemorial demon sword, the god-devouring sword. Yi Guchen's words caused the entire area to fall silent for a moment. Some of the elders from the overlord factions could even hear their breathing quickening. The immemorial demon sword, even if it was on the earth ranking, was enough to move people's hearts. Seeing the greed and passion in the eyes of the elders around him, Yi Guchen's lips curled into a mocking smile. He then said, Actually, the god-devouring sword is not with me. What? Yi Guchen's words stunned everyone, and shock appeared on their faces. Back in the Tianhuang Plains, everyone had seen with their own eyes that Yi Guchen had obtained the god-devouring sword. How could he say that the god-devouring sword was not with him now? Indeed, after I was lucky enough to escape from death, the immemorial demonic sword flew away on its own. Think about it, with my cultivation strength at that time. How could I control the god-devouring sword? Yi Guchen said. Indeed, Yi Guchen's cultivation back then was so weak. How could the god-devouring sword choose him as its master? That's right. The immemorial demon sword has a spirit. It's impossible for it to submit to a weakling. Some people pondered and felt that this was the case. But obviously, not everyone thought so. With just one sentence, you think you can make us give up? When Donglu sneered, if they were so easily deceived, they would have lived in vain. Oh, if you don't believe me, if you have any means to detect the immemorial demon sword, you can give it a try. Yi Guchen's lips curled into a faint smile. Looking at Yi Guchen's confident and calm appearance, many people were puzzled. Could it be that the immemorial demon sword was really not with Yi Guchen? The reason why Yi Guchen was so confident was naturally because the immemorial demon sword was indeed not with him. Duguqiuemo had already hidden the god-devouring sword deep in his dantian, blocking all qi. It was impossible for it to be discovered. Let this old man do it. This old man has a jade seal that can sense the ultimate divine weapons in the world. If there is an immemorial demon sword, it will definitely not escape detection. an elder from the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion said as he walked out. He took out a jade-green jade seal, infused it with qi, and then approached Yi Guqin. A ray of light was released and landed on Yi Guqin's body. Although Yi Guqin's 9-Dragon Thunder Prison Sword was also a 10th Tribulation Divine weapon, it was not enough to cause a reaction from the jade seal. At this time, the Thunder Calamity Sword that had been silent for a long time in Yi Guqin's dantian hid in the depths of his dantian. The Thunder Calamity Sword had the ability to automatically hide its qi, so it was not afraid of being detected. What kind of existence is this Thunder Calamity Sword that brought me to this world? Yi Guqin could not help but think to himself. The 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra and the 1,000 Deities Tribulation Sword were also obtained from the Thunder Calamity Sword. However, he still shook his head secretly. Perhaps he would have to wait until his cultivation level was higher before he could begin to investigate the mystery of this Thunder Calamity Sword. After a final probe, the jade seal did not have any reaction. It seems that this boy really does not have the immemorial demon sword on him. The elder shook his head. This caused an uproar in all directions. They did not expect Yi Guqin's words to be true. The 7th Star Lord and the others also looked extremely gloomy. That elder was from the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion. Obviously, it was impossible for him to be in cahoots with Yi Guqin. In this way, Yi Guqin's words were indeed the truth. The 7th Star Lord's eyes flashed slightly, and he still said unwillingly, "This at most only proves that the God Devourer sword is not on you. But it does not mean that you don't know where it is." When Donglu also said, "That's right. Even if you don't have the God Devourer sword, you might have hidden it somewhere and deliberately misled people into thinking that you don't have the God Devourer sword." Their words made some sense, and it made many people come back to their senses. Yi Guqin also sighed secretly. As expected, no one who could become a heavenly tribulation saint was a fool. It was impossible to fool them so easily. However, Yi Guqin did not want to completely disassociate himself. He only wanted to insist that he did not have the God Devourer sword. "I've tested what I should have tested and said what I should have said. Don't go too far." Proud Divine Continent frowned slightly. At this point, did the 7th Star Lord and the others still want to pester him? Chapter 1322. The 7th Star Lord, when Donglu, and the others looked uncertain when they heard that. Although they didn't believe Yi Guqin's words, they didn't have any evidence. It would be even more difficult for them to suppress Yi Guqin now that he was protected by Proud Divine Land and Beimiao. Most importantly, they didn't have the right to do so. The battlefield of heavenly talents was a place where life and death were determined by fate. It was understandable that Yi Guqin had killed Gu Xiaoyang and the others. Just when the situation was in a stalemate, a distant voice came from the void. "Old 7, forget it. Let's talk about it after Sky Burial Island. Don't let others think that the Starry Sword Pavilion is petty." The 7th Star Lord was unwilling to give up when he heard that voice. The person who spoke was the 3rd Star Lord who had attacked before. Since the 3rd Star Lord had spoken, the 7th Star Lord could only suppress his anger for the time being no matter how unwilling he was. "I'll let you live for a while longer. We'll settle everything after Sky Burial Island." The 7th Star Lord flung his sleeves and said coldly, then turned around and left. Not only did he fail to suppress Yi Guqin, but he also lost face in public. It was simply unacceptable for him. "Cherish your last moments," when Donglu said calmly. They also knew that it was unrealistic to suppress Yi Guqin now. However, after Sky Burial Island and the battlefield of heavenly talents was over, they could start to settle the score. Seeing that the big shots of the overlords couldn't do anything to Yi Guqin, the people of the other forces were also shocked. Tsk. Yi Guqin has grown so strong that even the overlords can't do anything to him for the time being. You can't say that. If the Starry Sword Pavilion and the other forces really want to take action, they won't be able to deal with Yi Guqin. They're only afraid of being criticized. That's right. After all, the rules of the battlefield of heavenly talents can't be broken casually. Most of the discerning people could see that Yi Guqin's crisis hadn't been resolved, but it had been delayed for a while. After Sky Burial Island, no one knew how the situation would develop. The seventh Star Lord, Wen Donglu, and the others temporarily stopped attacking Yi Guqin. As for the others like Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Nye, it was even more impossible for them to take the initiative to offend Yi Guqin. No matter what, Yi Guqin was safe and sound until the end of the Battle of Prodigies. Yi Guqin thought for a moment. He cupped his hands at Elder Qing's song of the Luofu Sword Pavilion and said, "Thank you for speaking up for me." Elder Qing Song smiled faintly and waved his hand. "Don't thank me. You once saved Xiaoyao in the Holy Imperial World. Consider this as returning the favor." As Elder Qing Song spoke, his gaze towards Yi Guqin became increasingly filled with admiration. At such a young age, his cultivation was superb, and his talent was outstanding. However, his personality was still so calm and composed. Even if Mt Tai collapsed in front of him, his expression would not change. And he even dared to face a saint. This kind of talent, this kind of temperament, in the entire South Horizon region, how many people could achieve this? If this child doesn't die prematurely in the future, he will definitely be an existence that can stir up the winds and clouds of the 9 heavens. Moreover, his relationship with Xiaoyao isn't bad. It's not that we can't pull him in, but, Elder Qing Song thought to himself, if the Luofu Sword Pavilion really took in Yi Guqin, it would probably lead to pressure from the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Divine Sword Sect, and other forces. Although the Luofu Sword Pavilion was also an overlord-level force, it would definitely be under great pressure when faced with multiple forces of the same level. Well, I'll first tell the pavilion about this place. As for the decision, I'll leave it to them. Elder Qing Song thought to himself. On the other side, Yi Guqin thanked the beautiful woman of the Misty Sword Pavilion again. "Don't thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank Songyue," the beautiful woman said with a chuckle. "Thank you, Miss Songyue," Yi Guqin said. Songyue nodded slightly, but her gaze was still averted. She did not know how she felt about Yi Guqin. That strange feeling might have come from the innate sword embryo, and the immortal divine embryo's innate compatibility. Seeing that Songyue was unwilling to look at him, Yi Guqin felt a little helpless. His relationship with Songyue could not be severed, and it was still messy. If one said that they were related, then they were. If one said that they were not related, then they were not that close. Yi Guqin had never cared much about relationships between men and women, so he did not know how to sort out his relationship with Songyue. Yi Guqin, before he could sort out his relationship with Songyue, Yin Wushuang and Ji Ling had already walked over. They heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that Yi Guqin was safe for the time being. "Yi Guqin, if Manlu sees that you're still alive, he'll definitely be very happy." Yen Chang'e also walked over, his eyes filled with emotions. Yi Guqin also fell silent when he heard that. Back then, the Heavenly God Sword Sect, the Starry Sword Pavilion, and the Dongfang family, the 3 overlord-level forces had pressured him. It was Feng Manlu who stood out and blocked in front of him with his weak body. However, for some reason, Yi Guqin had a vague feeling that Feng Manlu would not die so easily. Feng Manlu was Yi Guqin's master, so he would not die so easily. However, Yi Guqin did not say it out loud because it was just his intuition. Haha, heroes indeed come from the young. It's all thanks to Jiankui that the Swallow Cloud dynasty is able to survive. The Grand Emperor of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Yanhe, walked over happily. Yi Guqin also cupped his hands slightly. "By the way, Jiankui, how is Wushuang? She misses you day and night," Yanhe said with a smile. If they could get on Yi Guqin's good side, the Swallow Cloud dynasty's position would be even more stable. "What are you talking about, Imperial Grandfather?" Yin Wushuang blushed. It was hard to imagine that Yin Wushuang, who had always been tough and did not lose to men, would blush so shyly. Yi Guqin only smiled faintly and did not say a word. He still had a heavy burden on his shoulders, so there was no way he could put his mind on romance. "All right, everyone. If you don't mind, why don't we go back to the Sword Dynasty for a gathering?" Proud Divine Prefecture asked. "Of course. How could we not go when the Alliance Master of Proud Divine Prefecture invites us?" Yanhe nodded and said. "Haha, I wonder if I can go and ask for a drink?" Jun Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said. "You're more than welcome." Yi Guqin smiled and said. There was no need to say anything more since they were close friends. Yi Guqin, the charming young girl in red seemed to want to say something, but hesitated. Embarrassment, shame, and embarrassment could be seen on her face. It was Princess Fengxi. She did not expect that Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty was Yi Guqin. She used to be in a high position, so high that she could even flirt with Yi Guqin and have him sleep with her. But now their statuses had undergone an earth-shattering change. Yi Guqin had become someone that Princess Fengxi had to look up to. What was even more embarrassing was that she had been forced to participate in the plan to trap Yin Wushuang in the sacred imperial realm. This has nothing to do with you. I just hope that you can let Empress Fengni know that she will stop thinking about the Yanyan dynasty in the future, Yi Guqin said faintly. Of course. Princess Fengxi nodded fearfully. The Yanyan dynasty was no longer in existence that Fengni dynasty dared to provoke. That's good. If you don't mind, let's catch up, Yi Guqin said faintly. Thank you. Princess Fengxi's eyes were wet. She did not expect that Yi Guqin would not mind what she had done. Yen Wushuang did not mind too much. After all, this was Empress Fengni's matter. Princess Fengxi was just stuck in the middle, and was in a difficult position. Chapter 13:23. They looked at Yi Guqin, who was chatting with Yi Songyue, Yin Wushuang, Princess Fengxi and the others. Some of the sky prides present were envious and jealous. He's quite popular with women, but this is the only time he'll have a good time. Senior brother Haoyan doesn't have to do anything, I'll definitely kill him on Sky Burial Island. Chu Xuanjin squinted his eyes. Although Yi Guqin had already shown his strength, Chu Xuanjin was still not afraid. He was the king of sky prides. Apart from Di Haoyan, he was not afraid of anyone. He even dared to fight against the 4 emperors. On the other side, Huang Qianqiu's face was also extremely cold. Yi Guqin, Duguqioma, the two of you should cherish your last moments. Sky Burial Island will be the place where you will die. Huang Qianqiu said coldly in his heart. Burying Sky Island would open in 2 months. In other words, all the sky prides who survived from the sacred imperial realm would have 2 months to rest. Many people thought that these 2 months would be Yi Guqin's last moments. Not to mention whether Yi Guqin could make it out of Sky Burial Island alive. Even if he could, the Starry Sword Pavilion, Divine Sword Sect, Dongfang family, and other forces would not let him go. Yi Guqin, let's settle our grudge on Sky Burial Island, Gu Zun said in a hoarse voice. His obsession with Yi Guqin was the same as Yi Guqin's obsession with Gu Xiaoyang. If he did not get rid of it, the heart demon would always exist. I'll wait. Yi Guqin looked straight at Gu Zun. The grudge between the sword and the saber had been dragging on since the forbidden city of the Saint Origin dynasty. It was time to settle it. Let's settle it on Sky Burial Island. Master, I want to be a guest at the Sword Dynasty too. A girl with 2 ponytails and a face as clear as jade flashed over. She was the princess of the War God dynasty, Zhao Xiaodi. I've already said that you don't need to be my maid. Yi Guqin felt a headache coming on. No, I Zhao Xiaodi, am a woman of my word. I will never go back on my words. Zhao Xiaodi puffed out her flat and soft chest and said righteously. Yen Wushuang, Princess Fengxi, and the others looked at Yi Guqin strangely. Even a little girl couldn't resist Yi Guqin's charm? Who would have thought that under the Jiankui mask would be the famous Yi Guqin who heavily injured Di Haoyan? Zhao Shinkong walked over with a complicated expression. Thank you for that, Yi Guqin said. He was naturally referring to Zhao Shinkong's bravery on the Sage Emperor stage. That's all, Zhao Shinkong said. Let's go to the Sword Dynasty? Yi Guqin asked. Why not? Zhao Shinkong smiled faintly. A smile of gratitude and enmity. Seeing this scene, many people sighed. Who would have thought that the War God dynasty and the Sword Dynasty would fight for so long? And the son of the Heaven War Emperor actually became friends with Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. If the Heaven War Emperor knew about this, he would probably be speechless. Although Yi Guqin is quite good at making enemies, he's also quite good at making friends. Jun Xiaoyao, Yi Songyue, and Zhao Shinkong are all on good terms with him. This is his charisma, okay? If it were you, would Jun Xiaorao and the others be willing to take a second look at you? Dragons don't live with snakes, some of the geniuses discussed. On the other side, Dugachyo Emo stood alone. Compared to Yi Guchen, who was surrounded by everyone, Dugachyo Emo seemed very lonely. However, his demonic and cold expression didn't change at all. There wasn't a trace of envy or jealousy. He was Yi Guchen's shadow. He was a sharp sword hidden in the darkness. Only when Yi Guchen needed him the most would he walk out of the darkness and become the sharpest sword in Yi Guchen's hand. Chioemo. On the side, Princess Luoho stepped forward with worry in her gray eyes. She had a feeling that Dugachyomo's attitude towards Yi Guchen was a bit strange. But she couldn't tell what was wrong. Don't worry, just wait for the Battle of Zongtian Island. Dugachyo closed his eyes and said lightly. As for Chen Qingxiao, he had been severely injured when he was fighting Dao Wuming. When they left the Holy Emperor realm, Dugachyo directly destroyed Chen Qingxiao's mind with the Soul Demon Seed. The first half of the Battle of the Holy Emperor realm on the battlefield of geniuses came to an end. At first, everyone thought that the most dazzling people in the Battle of the Holy Emperor realm would be Huang Qianxiu, Chu Xuanjin, Gu Xiaoyang, Jun Xiaoyao, and the others. But they didn't expect that a genius of a dynasty would rise against the trend and become the most dazzling star. They also didn't expect that the real identity of Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, who always wore a ghost face mask, was Yi Guchen. He had once stirred up a storm on the Tianhuang Plain. The ultimate inheritance of the Holy Emperor realm had also fallen into the hands of Yi Guchen. The news of the Holy Emperor realm began to spread rapidly in the Nantian region, as if it had grown wings. Yi Guchen, on the other hand, was preparing to return to the Sword Dynasty with a group of sword sons and friends to recuperate. The entire battlefield of geniuses was divided into two halves. The first half of the Battle of the Holy Emperor realm was still the internal competition of the geniuses of the Nantian region. The second half of the Battle of Zongtian Island was the real ultimate battlefield, where geniuses of the Dark World would appear. It was far more brutal than the Holy Emperor realm. And at that time, some of the real top geniuses of the Nantian region would appear. The geniuses and successors of the four great dominating clans would also appear. It could be said that Zongtian Island was the ultimate battle between the geniuses of the Nantian region and the Dark World. Only the strongest and most talented geniuses could shine on Zongtian Island. Brother Yi, Di Haotian should appear in the Battle of Zongtian Island this time. He may even become the leader of the geniuses of the Nantian region. If he attacks you, it will be troublesome. On a ship, Jun Xiaoyao frowned and said to Yi Guchen, different situations call for different actions. Di Haotian is a man, not a god, Yi Guchen said. Moreover, the trump card that he had prepared for Di Haotian had not been revealed yet. Brother Yi, it's good that you have this confidence. As long as you can survive the Battle of Zongtian Island, I believe that the Supreme Elders in the pavilion will not be indifferent to you, Jun Xiaorao said. I hope so, Yi Guchen said. After Zongtian Island, he did need the protection of a force. Although Bei Miao was following him to the Sword Dynasty, she had no place to go for the time being. She was just going to join in the fun. It was impossible to expect Bei Miao to stay by Yi Guchen's side for a long time. Shuer, will you appear in the battle between Zongtian Island and the Dark World? Yi Guchen murmured to himself. He thought of the adorable little girl with bright silver hair. He could not forget that when Shuer awakened the physique of the Heaven Weeping Witch, she transformed into a peerless woman, Jiru Shui. After the battle on the Tianhuang Plain, Shuer was brought back to the Dark World by Shui Yiqing. Yi Guchen had a hunch that he might be able to see Shuer again on Zongtian Island. At that time, how would Shuer face him? Chapter 1324. The first half of the Battle of Geniuses, the Battle of the Holy Emperor Realm, had finally come to an end. All the forces had returned home for the time being to prepare for the Battle of Zongtian Island in 2 months. Yi Guchen also followed the Sword Dynasty's group and returned to the dynasty with his good friends. After returning to the dynasty, Yi Guchen also hosted a banquet for his friends. It could be said that without their help, Yi Guchen would have had a hard time obtaining the Sacred Emperor's inheritance. Yi Guchen's personality tended to be cold and unsociable. He was not good at taking the initiative to make friends with others. However, his charisma made a group of people willing to take the initiative to make friends with him. As for what would happen to Yi Guqin after the Battle of Geniuses, that was something to be considered in the future. Jun Xiaorao and the others also believed that Yi Guqin would be able to turn the situation around. The banquet lasted for 3 days before it came to an end. Yi Guqin then continued to regulate his breath and cultivate. Yi Guqin sat alone in a pavilion in the palace of the Sword Dynasty. He took out a soul-luring lotus. The translucent soul-luring lotus refracted 7-colored light. Vaguely, waves of vigorous soul power undulations spread outwards. The soul-luring lotus is a top sacred medicine. Its rarity is no less than the tree of enlightenment in my body. Can this soul-luring lotus help people form a soul palace? Yi Guqin looked at it carefully. Then he took out a crystal coffin from his origin ring. It was the soul-accumulating coffin that Su Qingyu's primordial spirit was placed in. Su Qingyu had been in a state of hibernation ever since he absorbed the saint's soul crystal. The soul-luring lotus is precious, but I am indebted to Senior Su. Duguqioma was personally refined by him. This soul-luring lotus should be helpful for the recovery of Senior Su's primordial spirit. Yi Guqin muttered to himself. Yi Guqin's principle was to seek revenge and repay kindness. This was Yi Guqin's principle. Moreover, there were 5 soul-luring lotuses. Giving one to Su Qingyu was not a big deal. Most importantly, Su Qingyu was Su Jianshi's father. He hoped that Su Jianshi would be reunited with Su Qingyu when he brought her back. Thinking of this, Yi Guqin directly opened the profound spirit coffin and put a soul-luring lotus inside. In an instant, Su Qingyu's primordial spirit, which was in a deep slumber, automatically released a force of absorption and refinement. The pure medicinal strength of the soul-guiding lotus was gradually being refined and absorbed. Yi Guqin put away the coffin again. I hope Senior wakes up soon, Yi Guqin thought to himself. After that, Yi Guqin continued to immerse himself in cultivation. After all, he had obtained the 1,000 Leaves Saint Emperor's inheritance, the 10,000 Swords Divine Technique. Even with Yi Guqin's monstrous talent in swordsmanship, it was not easy to cultivate a saint-level swordsmanship. The entire South Horizon region welcomed a brief period of peace. However, everyone knew that this was just the calm before the storm. 2 months later, the Battle of Sky Burial Island would begin. That would be a major event that would truly affect the South Horizon region. In a bustling city in the South Horizon region, in a restaurant, a white-haired old man with a red nose was holding a wine gourd and drinking nonstop. His body emitted a strong stench of alcohol, causing a group of people around him to stay far away. This old man has been drinking here for more than half a year. Is no one going to care about him? What's there to care about? Anyway, he paid for it. He can drink as much as he wants. It doesn't matter if he drinks himself to death. 2 waiters whispered to each other. At this moment, a group of burly men walked into the restaurant. Damn it, it's the Black Fiend Gang. When the customers in the restaurant saw this group of black-armored men, their expressions changed. The Black Fiend Gang was a gang that was like a local snake in this city. The leader of the black-armored men waved his hand and said, "Waiters, bring the wine." Yes, right away. The 2 waiters trembled as they ran to get the wine. The group of Black Fiend Gang members sat down. However, the old man with the red nose happened to be sitting in the center seat, and his body emitted a pungent and unpleasant smell. The leader of the black-armored men frowned and said coldly, "Old man, get out of my way." The old man with the red nose acted as if he didn't hear it, and continued drinking from the wine gourd. "Hey, old man, are you looking for death?" A skinny monkey-like man stepped forward and pushed the old man with the red nose to the ground. The old man lay on the ground and continued drinking from the wine gourd. This old fart. The leader of the black-armored men felt a burst of anger in his heart. He lifted his foot, and the aura of a celestial palace supremacy burst forth. This leader of the Black Fiend Gang was a supremacy with a strong cultivation base. The leader of the Black Fiend Gang stepped on the head of the old man with the red nose. The other people in the restaurant all averted their gazes, revealing a pitiful expression. The old man with the red nose still didn't move. However, at this moment, An old man with a goatee and a linen robe appeared in the restaurant like a ghost. He grabbed the Black Fiend gang leader's leg with one hand and suddenly twisted. Crack! The scalp-numbing sound of bones cracking rang out, and the Black Fiend gang leader screamed in pain. "How dare you touch our leader? Die!" The surrounding disciples of the Black Fiend gang roared and attacked together. However, the goatee elder only stomped one foot, and a terrifying burst of saint power erupted. The Black Fiend gang leader and the other members didn't even have the chance to struggle or fear before they exploded into balls of bloody foam. The entire restaurant was filled with blood. However, the goatee elder's linen robe wasn't stained with a single drop of blood. The others in the restaurant were all stunned, and their legs trembled. The famous Black Fiend gang was destroyed just like that? Even the leader of the Venerables exploded into a pile of flesh and blood. That power! Could it be a saint? The teeth of the others in the restaurant were chattering. They had never seen such a major figure in their lives. However, what was even more shocking was yet to come. The old man with the red nose continued to drink, as if he didn't see the scene in front of him. Seeing this, the goatee elder shook his head slightly and sighed. "Duan Tianfeng, you've been drinking for half a year. It's about time you woke up." If Yiguchen was here, he would definitely recognize this white-haired old man who drank all day long. It was the old drunkard, the South Forging Saint, Duan Tianfeng. After the incident at the Tianhuang Plains, even Duan Tianfeng thought that Yiguchen had died. Duan Tianfeng felt extremely guilty when he saw the disciple he had painstakingly nurtured being unable to save him in the end. What made him even more powerless was that, although he was an 8-star Grandmaster Artificer, his current influence was far from what it used to be. With his hands crippled, he couldn't recover to his peak. This also made Duan Tianfeng unable to take revenge on the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Heavenly God Sword Sect, and other overlord forces. All kinds of powerlessness made Duan Tianfeng very tired and exhausted. So he had been holed up in this small city, ignoring the outside world and drinking all day long. "Grand Elder Yang, what are you doing here again?" Duan Tianfeng said as he drank. He didn't seem to care that Grand Elder Yang was a saint in front of him. If I didn't come to find you, the entire Divine Artifact sect would have been controlled by Xiao Gongshu and the Nangong family. Elder Yang sighed deeply. What? Xiao Gongshu lost? A bone-deep hatred flashed through Duan Tianfeng's drunken old eyes. Chapter 1325. The words Xiao Gongzi were engraved in Duan Tianfeng's bones. Duan Tianfeng, the South Forging Saint. Xiao Gongzi, the North Yen Artifact Sovereign. From their titles, it was clear that the two were rivals, as if they were destined to counter each other. However, some people didn't know that the two had once been fellow disciples of the same sect. The sect they belonged to was called the Divine Artifacts Sect. Although the Divine Artifacts Sect wasn't listed in the One Mountain, One Sea, One Immortal Valley, or the 3 sects for pavilions and 5 aristocratic families, it was still a sect with a terrifying foundation. From the name, one could tell that the Divine Artifacts Sect was a sect that focused on forging weapons. A sect like this might not have as many top experts as the overlords. However, their foundation, connections, and resources were extremely abundant. It could be said that the Divine Artifact Sect could easily summon a group of tribulation saints to help them in battle. Even a Saint King would be able to move them. This was something that the overlords couldn't do. Moreover, even the overlord forces sometimes needed Divine Artifact Sect services. Many of the swords, weapons, protective tools, and treasures of their disciples were also provided by the Divine Artifacts Sect. It was obvious that the Divine Artifacts Sect had an extraordinary status in the South Horizon region. The overlords might not be afraid of the Divine Artifacts Sect, but they didn't want to offend them for no reason. Duan Tianfeng and Xiao Gongzi were the 2 brightest stars of the Divine Artifacts Sect. However, in the end, they became enemies because of a woman. That woman was called Nangong Huajing. Duan Tianfeng frowned when he recalled those painful memories. He asked in a hoarse voice, "What are you talking about? What exactly is going on?" Elder Yang was the first elder of the Divine Artifacts Sect, Yang Qi, a saint. Yang Qi said, The junior sect master selection of the Divine Artifacts sect is about to begin. You know that Xiao Gongzi is from the strongest faction in the sect. Even I, the first elder's faction, can't compare to him. I'm afraid that only the sect master's faction can suppress Xiao Gongzi's faction. Duan Tianfeng fell silent at Yang Qi's words. After losing that bet, Duan Tianfeng's hands were crippled, his reputation and name abandoned. He left the Divine Artifacts sect and wandered the world. If he hadn't left at that time, right now, Mo Tianfeng should be one of the leaders of Divine Artifacts sect. Even so, Forging Tianfeng still held an extraordinary position in the Divine Artifact sect. After all, his previous qualifications, reputation, and standards were all here. As for his crippled hands, it wasn't that there was no way to heal them. It was only because of that bet that Mo Tianfeng could not treat his hands. Otherwise, it would be considered a breach of the agreement. So Xiao Gongshu wants his disciple to become the young sect master? Duan Tianfeng asked. Yang Qi nodded heavily and said, naturally. You should have heard of Master Zhao's disciple. He is the Nangong noble clan's genius, one of the 10 young masters, the divine weapon young master, Nangong Juyun. It can be said that Nangong Juyun is the most talented junior I've ever seen. Yang Qi sighed deeply. There were quite a few forging geniuses in Divine Artifacts sect, but compared to Nangong Juyun, they were like fireflies compared to the moon. Nangong Juyun was known as the Divine Armament Prince. From this, one could see how monstrous his talent in forging was. Furthermore, Nangong Juyun was born in the Nangong noble clan, an overlord clan. At the same time, in addition to his talent in forging, Nangong Juyun's strength also stood at the peak of the younger generation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to become one of the 10 young masters. Martial path and crafting path. His dual talents had created Nangong Juyun, who was surrounded by countless halos. Is there no one in Divine Artifacts sect who can contend with Nangong Juyun? Duan Tianfeng asked. Almost none. Moreover, Xiao Gongshu wants Nangong Juyun to marry the daughter of the sect master, Gu Xiangling, after he becomes the young sect master. At that time, won't Divine Artifacts sect fall under the control of Xiao Gongshu and the Nangong noble clan? Yang Qi said coldly. Nangong Juyun represented the Nangong noble clan. If he became the young sect master, he would definitely be the next sect master. This way, with Xiao Gongshu's help, the entire Divine Artifacts sect would fall under someone else's control. This was not something Yang Qi wanted to see. At that time, where would the elders of Divine Artifacts sect go? Would they have to listen to Xiao Gongshu and the Nangong noble clan? Is the sect master not going to say anything? Duan Tianfeng asked. Say. Yang Qi shook his head. What can the sect master do? Can he not choose the next sect master? This is the rule set by Divine Artifacts sect. Even if the sect master doesn't want Nangong Juyun to take the position, he can't stop him. Haha. What's the point of telling me this? Do you want me to compete with Nangong Juyun? Duan Tianfeng laughed at himself. His only half-disciple, Yi Guchen, had died in the Tianhuang Plains. He couldn't even fulfill his bet with Xiao Gongshu. How could he help Divine Artifacts sect? Yang Qi was slightly taken aback by Duan Tianfeng's words. Of course I'm not asking you to compete. Didn't you take in a disciple? Yang Qi had heard that Duan Tianfeng had fought for Yi Guchen on the Tianhuang Plains. He had even called for Leng Qianhen and the others to help. However, Duan Tianfeng's face darkened when he heard this. These words were like tearing open a scar that had formed over his scab. Yang Qi, are you mocking me? Duan Tianfeng's face turned red. His eyes were filled with pain. Yang Qi was even more surprised. Duan Tianfeng, haven't you heard the recent rumors? Rumors? What rumors? Duan Tianfeng was stunned as well. He had been living in seclusion in this small city. He was always drunk and dejected. He didn't pay attention to the outside world, and was almost cut off from the outside world. Your disciple Yi Guchen didn't die. He even appeared in the Holy Imperial World. His performance shocked everyone. Yang Qi said. What? What did you say? Say it again. Duan Tianfeng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body trembled, and he stood up abruptly. His hands tightly gripped Yang Qi's arms, and his drunken eyes became incomparably sober. Your disciple didn't die. He changed his name and became Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Then, Yang Qi told Duan Tianfeng everything that had happened in the Holy Imperial world. In the end, Duan Tianfeng laughed at the sky. Hot tears rolled down his cheeks. Haha, I knew it. I knew it. My judgment can't be wrong. Yi Guqin didn't disappoint me. Haha. Duan Tianfeng lost his composure. He laughed crazily to vent the depression in his heart. He didn't think that Yang Qi would lie to him about this. Great, this is great. Duan Tianfeng's depression was swept away. He seemed to have recovered. Master Xiao lost. Your disciple, Nangong Jueyin, also lost. It's time to end this bet. Duan Tianfeng was excited. Chapter 1326. Only the heavens knew how happy Duan Tianfeng was when he heard the news. Yang Qi sighed when he saw Duan Tianfeng's state. He didn't want the former Saint Blacksmith to continue to be dispirited. The artifact sect needed Duan Tianfeng. As long as Duan Tianfeng could fulfill the bet, his hands could be healed again. By then, Duan Tianfeng would be back to his peak. Therefore, the artifact sect had never given up on Duan Tianfeng. Great. I can't wait to go to the Sword Dynasty to find that kid. He made me sad for so long. Duan Tianfeng's face was rosy. It was rare for him to be happy. But Yang Qi was not as happy as Duan Tianfeng. He hesitated for a while, then said, Your disciple is indeed powerful. He is unbeatable in the Saint Emperor world. Even Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Sword Pavilion died in his hands. But what? Duan Tianfeng asked. But martial prowess does not represent the art of forging. The selection of the future master of the artifact sect is not a competition of martial prowess, but of forging. Compared to Nangong Jueyin. Yang Qi didn't finish his sentence because of Duan Tianfeng's emotions. But what he meant was that Yi Guqin might not be as good as Nangong Jueyin in forging. No, it was a possibility that was removed. In Yang Qi's mind, Yi Guqin was definitely not as good as Nangong Jueyin. But he couldn't say it out loud. What? Are you saying that my disciple is not as good as Nangong Jueyin? Duan Tianfeng snorted. He had guessed what Yang Qi was thinking. Yang Qi was embarrassed. He didn't know what to say. Don't worry. I can see that my disciple is obsessed with swords. I know his talent as well. Otherwise, why would I choose him? Duan Tianfeng said confidently. Back then, he was still an old drunkard in the Saint Origin Dynasty's Milky Way province. Back then, he told Yi Guqin that he would teach him the forbidden art of forging. He would use his soul to forge swords and cultivate both sword and life. Duan Tianfeng would never forget the passion in Yi Guqin's eyes at that time. He wasn't afraid of the forbidden art of forging that could threaten his life. Instead, he was excited, curious, and amazed. How could a person like him be ordinary on the path of smithing? Furthermore, Gong Tianfeng was certain that Yi Guqin hadn't thrown away his forging tools along the way. When he saw the confident look on Duan Tianfeng's face, Yang Qi could not understand why he was so confident in Yi Guqin. If it was a competition of strength, then Yang Qi had nothing to say. Yi Guqin was definitely first class. However, Yang Qi had never heard of Yi Guqin's monstrous achievements in smithing. But now he had no choice but to treat a dead horse as a living horse. Since Mo Tianfeng had already decided on Yi Guqin, there was nothing he could do about it. Alright then. Since you have decided on Duan Tianfeng, bring him to Heavenly Craftsmanship City. There are only a few days left before the competition for the position of young sect master. Yang Qi waved his hand. Heavenly Craftsmanship City was a rather famous giant city in the South Horizon region. It was also where the Divine Artifacts sect was located. Duan Tianfeng nodded slightly. He couldn't wait any longer. Yi Guqin, I've placed all my hopes on you. Duan Tianfeng left the restaurant and looked into the distance. Duan Tianfeng had originally thought that he would never be able to fulfill the bet and defeat Elder Xiao in this lifetime. Now the heavens had given him another ray of hope. Elder Xiao has lost. Although I lost to you back then, my disciple will definitely defeat your disciple. Duan Tianfeng muttered to himself in a resolute and decisive tone. The Sword Dynasty had fallen into a rare silence during this period. Yan Wushuang and the others from the Swallow Cloud Dynasty had also been staying in the Sword Dynasty. The Divine Condor and Black Yi had also met with Yan Wushuang and the others. As for Yi Guchen, he had pushed aside all social activities and engrossed himself in cultivation. On this day, Zhao Xiaodi knocked on Yi Guchen's door. "What's wrong?" Yi Guchen looked up at Zhao Xiaodi and asked faintly. Zhao Shinkong had already returned to the War God Dynasty to prepare for the upcoming battle on Sky Burial Island. However, Zhao Xiaodi refused to return no matter what. She wanted to stay by Yi Guchen's side and fulfill the promise of being a maid. However, during this period of time, Zhao Xiaodi had indeed behaved like a sincere maid, which gave Yi Guchen a headache. However, after getting used to it for a few days, Yi Guchen could only let her be. There are two pieces of good news. Master, do you want to hear the good news first or the good news first? Zhao Xiaodi smiled mischievously. Go ahead. Yi Guchen spat out a word, his head aching. Given his cold personality, he really didn't get along with the eccentric Zhao Xiaodi. Alright, the first piece of good news is that Master has replaced young Master Nebula, Gu Xiaoyang, as one of the new 10 great young masters, Sword Young Master. As Zhao Xiaodi spoke, a hint of amazement appeared in her big bright eyes. The 10 great young masters of the South Horizon region was definitely a title that countless geniuses revered. There were countless geniuses who wanted to become one of the 10 great young masters. Back then, Gu Xiaoyang had the ability to take the position and squeeze out young Master 3 lives to become young Master Nebula, because he had obtained Yi Guchen's innate sword embryo. Now Yi Guchen, who had killed Gu Xiaoyang, automatically became one of the 10 great young masters. The 10 great young masters weren't fixed. If someone was defeated or killed, the victor would automatically succeed the throne. And if the winner was defeated by someone else, he would be replaced. Therefore, those who could occupy the 10 great young masters for a long time were called old masters with strong strength. Young Master Haotian Di Haotian, Young Master Xuanjin Chu Xuanjin, and Young Master Xiaoyao Jun Xiaoyao were all old masters. As for Gu Xiaoyang, he was just one of the new 10 great young masters. Oh, got it. Yi Guchen nodded lightly. His expression and reaction were very indifferent, even he didn't care. Is this the reaction? Zhao Xiaodi was speechless. If it were other geniuses, it would be an honor to be able to become one of the 10 great young masters. But Yi Guchen didn't seem to care at all. It's just a title. I don't care about the title of 10 great young masters at all. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. Zhao Xiaodi couldn't help but admire him even more. What's the second news? Yi Guchen asked lightly. Zhao Xiaodi replied. An acquaintance of Master is looking for you. Oh, who is it? Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows, looking curious. He used to be a famous figure, the South Forging Saint Bing Tianfeng. Zhao Xiaodi said. What senior Bing Tianfeng? Yi Guchen's eyes suddenly flashed. He hurriedly got up and flashed out like a rainbow. Zhao Xiaodi was left alone in the same place. After a long time, she came back to her senses. Seriously, he didn't react at all when he heard that he was one of the 10 great young masters, but he reacted so strongly when he heard that an acquaintance was coming. Zhao Xiaodi muttered, but the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. But maybe this is Master's charm. He didn't care about fame and valued friendship. She finally understood why her brother Zhao Shinkong admired Yi Guchen so much. On the other side, Yi Guchen also arrived at a guest hall. When he saw the white-haired figure, Yi Guchen's heart stirred slightly, and he felt a little emotional. Senior Bing Tianfeng, long time no see. Chapter 1327. When Duan Tianfeng saw Yi Guchen, excitement surfaced in his old eyes. In fact, there were even faint tears in his eyes, but he quickly covered them up. Good, you didn't disappoint me. Duan Tianfeng smiled. Thank you for lending me a helping hand at the infinite plains. Yi Guchen cupped his hands together sincerely, and did not forget Duan Tianfeng's kindness. Duan Tianfeng was not only his mentor in smithing, but he had also helped him a lot at the infinite plains. Back then, many people did not dare to intervene when they were pressured by the overlord forces, but Duan Tianfeng dared to step forward. Moreover, if it was not for Duan Tianfeng, Leng Qianhen and the rest would not have appeared to help him. In terms of smithing, you are half my disciple. How could I not help you? Unfortunately, I don't have such great ability. Duan Tianfeng shook his head. Senior, it's enough that you have the heart, Yi Guchen said with a smile. Next, the two of them exchanged pleasantries. After all, Duan Tianfeng was someone Yi Guchen knew earlier. They had known each other since the Sky River province. So much time has passed. You, who lost your sword embryo in the Saint Origin dynasty, have also reached this stage and become one of the top 10 young masters in the South Sky region. Duan Tianfeng could not help but exclaim. He had witnessed Yi Guchen's growth along the way. He was a good-for-nothing young man who lost his sword embryo in a low-level dynasty. Now he had become the famous sword young master in the South Sky region, Jin Kuei from the sword dynasty. Only Yi Guchen knew how difficult it was. After that, Yi Guchen treated Duan Tianfeng to a feast and Leng Qianhen also came to meet him. After eating and drinking, Duan Tianfeng seemed to be thinking about something and hesitated. Senior, what's the matter? Yi Guchen could tell that Duan Tianfeng seemed to have something on his mind. This, Duan Tianfeng stammered. Previously, when he rushed to the Sword Dynasty, he wanted Yi Guchen's help. However, Yi Guchen still had a heavy burden on his shoulders. He had to prepare for the battle on Burial Sky Island 2 months later. If he let Yi Guchen do this now, would it delay his cultivation? Therefore, Duan Tianfeng was hesitant. Yi Guchen frowned when he saw Duan Tianfeng's reaction. Senior, there's no need to talk about our relationship. You're treating me like an outsider by hiding it like this. Duan Tianfeng was startled hearing this before he burst out laughing while shaking his head. Hee, you're right. I'll tell you about it first. Afterwards, Duan Tianfeng told Yi Guchen about Divine Artifacts Sect and the competition for the position of Junior Sect Master. So that's how it is. The competition for the position of Junior Master of the Divine Artifact Sect. Yi Guchen murmured. Yi Guchen had heard of Divine Artifact Sect before. Although they weren't part of the 3 sects, 4 pavilions, and 5 aristocratic families, their foundation and influence weren't any weaker than the overlord forces. Yi Guchen hadn't expected Duan Tianfeng to be from Divine Artifact Sect. What was even more unexpected was that Duan Tianfeng was actually a disciple of the same sect as Xiao Gongshu, Divine Artifact Prince, Nangong Juyun. I heard that he cultivates both the martial path and the path of tools. He's a top genius of the Nangong aristocratic family, one of the overlord aristocratic families, Yi Guchen said. Duan Tianfeng sighed softly when he heard this. Indeed, Xiao Gongshu's eye for talent isn't bad. He's chosen a good disciple. There aren't many people in Divine Artifact Sect who can compete with Nangong Juyun. Yi Guchen fell into deep thought. Duan Tianfeng sighed deeply. Yi Guchen, the most important thing for you now is to prepare for Sky Burial Island. If you participate in this competition, not only will you be wasting time, you might even become enemies with Nangong Juyun. Duan Tianfeng really wanted to win the bet and let his disciple defeat Xiao Gongshu's disciple. However, the prerequisite was that this wouldn't affect Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen shook his head when he heard this. Senior, what kind of person do you think I am? When Yi Guchen inherited Senior's forbidden art of forging, I promised that I would fulfill Senior's wish. And this time it's the best opportunity. How can this Yi miss it? Duan Tianfeng's expression froze slightly. There was a gratified look in his eyes. Xiao Gongshu had a good eye for choosing disciples. However, Duan Tianfeng wasn't bad either. Moreover, it's about time to forge my own famed sword. Yi Guchen's eyes glowed. His innate sword embryo had become an innate indestructible sword embryo after fusing with Yi Songyue's immortal divine embryo. It could be used as the core for forging a famed sword. In addition, he had also collected a few sacred materials. It was about time for him to start forging a sword embryo. Yi Guchen didn't plan to forge a divine weapon comparable to a famed sword in one go. It was impossible. Even Duan Tianfeng and Xiao Gongshu couldn't do it. Yi Guqin planned to slowly upgrade the sword embryo after forging it. As long as he persevered, he could eventually forge a famed sword that belonged to Yi Guqin. Senior, pack up. We'll go to Heavenly Craftsmanship City in a few days, Yi Guqin said. Okay. Duan Tianfeng nodded repeatedly. There was a rare hint of excitement in his old eyes. After being dispirited for so many years, he finally saw the dawn of revenge. In the next few days, after Yi Guqin took care of some chores, he also set off with Duan Tianfeng on a ship. This time, Yi Guqin didn't bring anyone else because the other sword sons had to prepare for the Battle of Zongtian Island. Jun Xiaoyao, Yan Wushuang, and the others also went to prepare for the battle. Yi Guqin even forced Zhao Xiaodi to stay in the Sword Dynasty, and did not allow her to go with him. In the end, only the Divine Condor and Xiao He followed Yi Guqin. Heavenly Craftsmanship City was a famous city in the Nantian region. It covered a large area. Although it was called a city, its area was comparable to that of a small dynasty. Heavenly Craftsmanship City was also where the artifact sect was located. It could be said that in the Nantian region, even the overlord-level forces didn't want to offend the artifact sect if it wasn't necessary. The artifact sect had always maintained a neutral stance among the various sections. This time, the selection of the junior sect master of the artifact sect had caused quite a stir in the Nantian region. After all, the person who would be selected as the junior sect master this time was very likely to be Nangong Jiuyun. Nangong Jiuyun was the genius of the Nangong family. This made many people wonder if the artifact sect would belong to the Nangong family in the future. This wasn't something that the other overlord-level forces wanted to see. Therefore, during this period, many people poured into Heavenly Craftsmanship City, wanting to see who the junior sect master of the artifact sect would be. After a few days, Yi Guqin and Duan Tianfeng finally arrived at Heavenly Craftsmanship City. Is that Heavenly Craftsmanship City? Yi Guqin stood on the deck of the flying boat and looked into the distance. He was shocked to see the giant city that stretched as far as the eye could see. The city walls of Heavenly Craftsmanship City were dozens of feet tall, like a towering mountain wall. The giant arched door at the city gate was also dozens of feet tall. Haha, the artifact sect is rich in resources. Apart from the overlord-level forces, not many forces can build such a giant city. Duan Tianfeng chuckled. After all, he used to be a member of the artifact sect. It was impossible for him to not have any feelings for the artifact sect. He still felt proud of it. It seems that I have underestimated the artifact sect's resources. Yi Guqin sighed. If you can defeat Nangong Jiuyun this time, and obtain the junior sect master's position, you might be able to relieve your current pressure. Duan Tianfeng said. Yi Guqin's eyes flickered when he heard this. If he could really obtain the support of the artifact sect, it would be very beneficial for Yi Guqin's current situation. However, the prerequisite was that he had the ability to defeat Nangong Jiuyun. Chapter 1328. Looks like I'll have to do my best, Yi Guqin thought to himself. His original intention in coming to Heavenly Craftsmanship City was to help Duan Tianfeng complete the bet and defeat Xiao Gong's disciple to fulfill his wish. However, it would also be beneficial to him if he could seize the position of junior sect master. However, Yi Guqin didn't have much hope for this. After all, his current identity was a little sensitive. Many overlord forces were eyeing him covetously. Even if Yi Guqin could win in the end, Divine Artifact Sect might not be willing to make Yi Guqin the junior sect master. That would be inviting trouble to themselves. Yi Guqin thought to himself as he entered the city with Duan Tianfeng. Duan Tianfeng had mixed feelings when he saw the city that he hadn't seen for a long time. After losing the bet with Xiao Gong, Duan Tianfeng crippled his own hands and left Divine Artifact Sect. Since then, he had been wandering the world and hadn't returned to Heavenly Craftsmanship City even once. However, now wasn't the time to be sentimental. The competition for the junior sect master position wouldn't last long. After that, Duan Tianfeng and Yi Guqin found an inn. Yi Guqin, I'm going to find Divine Artifact Sect's Grand Elder to understand some things. You can go to the Heavenly Craftsmanship path to train. As long as you pass and become a 2-star blacksmith, you can become a disciple of Divine Artifacts sect, Duan Tianfeng advised. It turned out that one had to be a disciple of Divine Artifacts sect to participate in the competition for the junior sect master position. Divine Artifacts sect couldn't just let an outsider participate in the competition. Moreover, because Divine Artifacts sect was a blacksmithing sect, the way they recruited disciples was different from other sects and factions. Divine Artifacts sect had set up a place called the Heavenly Craftsmanship Path in Heavenly Craftsmanship City. This place was specifically used to test the blacksmith's rank and cultivation. As long as one could pass the test and obtain a 2-star blacksmith rating, they could become a disciple of Divine Artifacts sect directly. This was valid at all times. I understand. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. To be honest, he didn't know what his blacksmith rank was. However, his blacksmithing skills hadn't fallen behind along the way. After giving some instructions, Duan Tianfeng went out to look for Yang Qi. On the other side, Yi Guchen took the Divine Condor and Little Black out to the Heavenly Craftsman Road. I'm going to the Heavenly Craftsman Path's trial. You guys can stroll around by yourselves. Yi Guchen said. It was inconvenient to bring them along to the Heavenly Craftsman Path's trial. All right, let's walk around on our own, the Divine Condor replied. Now the Divine Condor was also a 6th-ranked demonic beast, comparable to the top human Divine Palace realm experts. As for Xiaohei, he had the indestructible demonic body of the chaotic world demonic ape. So no one could hurt him unless a sage expert intervened. Yi Guchen was relieved to let them wander around. Soon after, Yi Guchen inquired about the location of the Heavenly Arts Road from passers-by. On the other hand, the Divine Condor and Blackie were wandering around aimlessly. Not long after, they arrived at a remote lakeside. There was a peach blossom tree by the lakeside. Under the peach blossom tree, a woman in an apricot-colored dress was staring at the surface of the lake with a depressed look on her face. The woman in the apricot-colored dress was very beautiful. Her eyebrows were picturesque and her skin was smoother than snow. She was leaning against the peach blossom tree. The petals of the peach blossom fell on her shoulders, adding to her beauty. It's a pretty big sister. The Divine Condor's eyes lit up. They happened to be bored, so they eagerly walked up to her. Hey, demonic beasts? The woman in the apricot-colored dress also noticed the arrival of the Divine Condor and Blackie. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. However, the Divine Condor didn't show his true form at the moment. He looked fist-sized, fiery red and furry, which made him quite cute. No woman could resist him. Although Blackie was a little dull, its fur was smooth, making it look charmingly naive. Big sister, why are you here alone? The Divine Condor's beady eyes glinted as he spoke cutely. He can talk? The woman in the apricot-colored dress was even more surprised. She hadn't seen many demonic beasts that were so intelligent. I can see that you are depressed. Why don't you tell me what's on your mind? The Divine Condor flapped his wings. A bitter smile appeared on the woman's face, but it was soon replaced by a self-deprecating one. She had been very depressed these days. Now she finally had someone to talk to. So what if they were just 2 demonic beasts? At that moment, the woman said, if you want to marry a man who is perfect in every aspect, but he is using you for his own personal gain, what should you do? The Divine Condor heard this and said, of course you won't marry him. If only you could be so straightforward. The woman in the apricot-colored dress shook her head slightly. That handsome man in a blue robe with cloud patterns seemed to appear in her mind again. He was perfect, but he only wanted to use her. At this moment, a man in luxurious clothes suddenly walked over from afar. Seeing the man in luxurious clothes, the woman's beautiful eyes faintly showed annoyance. Miss Gu, I finally found you. The man in luxurious clothes saw the beauty under the peach blossom tree and smiled faintly. His eyes were also filled with amazement. However, this woman was already taken. He couldn't think about her. What's the matter? The woman said coldly. Young master invites you to a small gathering. The man in luxurious clothes smiled faintly. No. The woman shook her head. Oh. Miss Gu, my young master is sincerely inviting you. You should give him face. The man in luxurious clothes revealed a playful smile. This woman was already his young master's plaything, but she was still so disobedient. The final result hasn't been decided yet, and he's already holding a celebration party? The woman sneered. Is there any doubt about the result? My young master will definitely come out on top. The man in luxurious clothes said confidently. But at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. Where did this lackey come from? Don't disturb miss, okay? Hearing the word lackey, the man in luxurious clothes' face darkened. He looked toward the voice. His gaze fell on the fluffy red bird that the woman was playing with in her hand. A talking beast? The man in luxurious clothes said coldly. You beast, you're courting death. The divine condor's feathers stood on end. It opened its mouth and spat out a ball of blazing flames. Don't forget that the divine condor was now a 6th-ranked demonic beast. It was comparable to a top human divine palace realm expert. No matter how strong the man in luxurious clothes was, he couldn't withstand the divine condor's flames. He was immediately engulfed by the flames. His hair and eyebrows were burnt. He was in a sorry state and his skin turned black. The man in luxurious clothes screamed. At this moment, Blackie flashed, and as if it had turned into a bolt of black lightning, it threw a punch at the man in luxurious clothes. The man in luxurious clothes cried out in pain. His eyes were black like a panda's. In the end, the man was beaten to the ground. He was in a sorry state. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His luxurious clothes were burnt black. The woman covered her mouth with her hand and revealed a rare smile. She obviously didn't expect these two adorable pets to be so powerful. Damn it, you two beasts. Don't let me see you next time. The man in luxurious clothes got up and fled in a sorry state. He didn't forget to curse. Where did this idiot come from? With such intelligence, the master behind this must be no better, the divine condor muttered. Hearing this, the woman burst into laughter. Her beautiful face was like a blooming flower. Don't worry, Mississippi. My young master might be able to get you out of this predicament. The divine condor patted its chest and said. Chapter 1329. Your young master? The woman raised her eyebrows slightly as a look of surprise appeared in her beautiful eyes. She had seen the strength of the divine eagle and Blackie. What kind of person was the young master behind them? However, the woman shook her head when she thought of the young man who could become the young master and marry her. Thank you, but the young master you speak of can't help me. The woman shook her head. Her name was Gu Xiangling. The young man who was going to become the young master and marry her was Nangong. He was one of the 10 young masters, the divine weapon young master, Nangong Juyun. In Gu Xiangling's eyes, how many people in the South Horizon region were qualified to compete with Nangong Juyun? Not to mention, Nangong Juyun was a monster in forging. As the daughter of the sect leader of the divine weapon sect, she had been influenced since she was young and had extraordinary talent in forging. However, she could only admit defeat in front of Nangong Juyun. Therefore, Gu Xiangling treated the divine eagle's words as a consolation. You don't believe me? My young master is very powerful. There shouldn't be many geniuses in the South Horizon region who can put on airs in front of him. The divine eagle clicked its tongue. Oh, is that so? Thank you for your kind intentions, but there's really no need. Your young master can't defeat him. Gu Xiangling shook her head again. She instinctively thought that the divine eagle was bragging. The young master behind the divine eagle might be a genius from a big family or a big dynasty. Even so, he was still far from being comparable to Nangong Juyun. There was no comparison at all. All right then, but I still have to remind you that my young master is really powerful. The divine eagle clicked its tongue. He had severely injured Di Haoyan, killed Gu Xiaoyang in the sacred imperial world, and became one of the 10 young masters, becoming the sword young master. There shouldn't be many geniuses like him in the South Horizon region. I know. Gu Xiangling smiled helplessly. How was he going to explain to this little bird that her marriage partner wasn't someone that anyone had the right to provoke? On the other side, Yi Guchen also came to the Heaven's Works Road after asking around. As far as the eye could see, the Heavenly Craftsman Road was an extremely large building. Yi Guchen walked straight in. There was an outer sect female disciple of divine artifact sect at the door. She was tall and slender and had a pretty face. She was currently napping on a table, because the Heaven's Craftsman path could come and challenge them at any time. There wouldn't be a situation where the flow of people would explode. Therefore, most of the time, the Heavenly Arts path was rather deserted. Moreover, the attention of Heavenly Craftsmanship City had been focused on the selection of the junior sect master of Divine Artifact sect. Therefore, at this time, there were even fewer people coming to the Heaven's Craftsman path to train. Dare I ask, miss, how should I go about this Heavenly Works path? Yiguchen asked calmly. The female disciple who was dozing off opened her sleepy eyes and saw Yiguchen's young face. Her thin eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Another hothead who wants to try his luck, the female disciple muttered to herself. She appeared to be rather impatient. After all, she had seen many young people like him. They were all here to try their luck. If he was lucky enough to become a 2-star blacksmith, he would be able to join the Divine Artifact sect as an outer disciple. However, in most cases, many people couldn't even reach 1 star. To enter the Heaven's Craftsman path, you need to pay 10,000 heaven crystals. There are 3 stages in the Heaven's Craftsman path, and each stage has a rating. If you walk out at the end and reach the 2-star standard, you will automatically be given a 2-star blacksmith token, the female disciple said. 2-star blacksmiths can become outer sect disciples? Then what about 3-star blacksmiths? Yiguchen asked. 3-star blacksmiths are inner sect disciples, the female disciple said with a frown. What about 4-star or 5-star blacksmiths? Yiguchen continued to ask. The female disciple raised her eyebrows, and the impatience on her face could no longer be concealed. She said coldly, I say, can you not bite off more than you can chew? Isn't it good to be down to earth and pass the stages honestly? Do you think you're the divine weapon prince, Nangong Juyin? Previously, when he challenged the Heavenly Craftsman path, he directly obtained a 5-star blacksmith's token. Who knows how much stronger he is now? Why don't you compete with him and obtain a 5-star blacksmith's token? The female disciple no longer concealed her impatience. There were always people who didn't know their own limits. They didn't have much ability, but their ambitions were higher than the sky. Yiguchen's face also turned cold. His origin ring flashed as he threw down 10,000 heaven crystals and directly stepped into the Heaven's Craftsman path. TSK, another person whose pride has been pierced. Does he really think that anyone can be Nangongju? Thinking of Nangongju Yun, the female disciple's eyes lit up. He could be said to be the dream of many young girls. Family background, appearance, identity, martial arts and smithing skills, he was almost invincible. Just as the female disciple was infatuated, she suddenly realized something. Oh no, I forgot to record that person's information. But forget it, he's so young, he probably isn't even a 2-star blacksmith yet. The female disciple thought for a moment, then shook her head and didn't pursue the matter. On the other hand, Yiguchen had already stepped into the Heaven's Craftsman path. The Heaven's Craftsman path was divided into 3 stages. The first stage tested a blacksmith's basic skills and the number of times they could forge. In front of Yiguchen, a silver-colored metal the size of a boulder appeared. This silver-colored metal was extremely difficult to forge. Ordinary metals could only be hammered once, but this metal required at least 3 times. However, as the number of times it was hammered increased, its size would also slowly decrease. The number of times I can forge is a basic skill. I wonder how many times I can forge now, Yiguchen thought to himself. He had already prepared a supreme-grade forging hammer in his origin ring. Next, Yiguchen began to forge rapidly. The silver-colored metal was slowly shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. The number of times he hammered the metal also skyrocketed like a blowout. The time limit for the first stage was 1 day. Forging for 24 hours was obviously a test of endurance for a blacksmith. However, this didn't affect Yiguchen much. Ancient God Body, Leakless Divine Palace, and Chaotic Sea of Consciousness. Regardless of whether it was his physical body, true chi, or mind, they were all at their peak. In the end, Yiguchen's number of times he hammered the metal broke through 1 million. Only 1 million. It's far from my limit. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. This was because he only had 1 day. If he was given a few more days, the number would be even more terrifying. After all, Yi Guchen was already able to forge 200,000 times a long time ago. Now 1 million times was really nothing. Next, Yi Guchen directly rushed to the second stage. As for the final result, it would only be given after passing 3 stages. The second stage tested the method of controlling fire. What Yi Guchen faced was a flaming purgatory. Within it, 10 fire dragons were rolling and bobbing up and down. Every fire dragon was formed from a different kind of heaven and earth unique flame. This stage tested the blacksmith's control and mastery of fire. Interesting. 2 pitch-black flames rose in Yi Guchen's eyes. The heart demon flame of nirvana was refined. Chapter 1330. The test of the Heaven's Works path was indeed difficult for ordinary blacksmiths. If there were 100 people challenging the Heaven's Works path at the same time, then it would be good if there were 1 or 2 people who could successfully obtain a 2-star blacksmith token. As for the highest grade token, the number of people who could obtain it was even rarer. This was also why that female disciple looked down on Yi Guchen. There were too many people who came to try their luck and were eliminated. But it was a pity that Yi Guchen had inherited the true teachings of forging Tianfeng. His forging skills had never fallen behind. At this moment in the second test of the Heaven's Works path, Yi Guchen was controlling the heart demon flame to fight against the 10 fire dragons. He used an exquisite fire control technique to turn the heart demon flame into streaks of silk that wrapped around the fire dragon. The blazing flames rolled, but Yi Guchen's expression was calm. In the end, a total of 8 fire dragons were annihilated by Yi Guchen's heart demon flame. Then Yi Guchen came to the third test of the Heaven's Works path. There were 100 stone blocks as far as the eye could see. On each stone block, there was a type of metal mineral placed. The third test was to use these 100 types of metal minerals to fuse together to form a new metal. The more the number, the better the result. Yi Guchen smiled faintly. He was the best at this kind of test. After all, he had already flipped through the Heaven's Works mineral collection that forging Tianfeng gave him. Next, Yi Guchen took out the casting hammer and began to forge. Time passed. Outside, the female disciple was still lying on the table in boredom, her hand supporting her chin. There's no movement from the Heaven's Works path. Did that kid just give up on the test and leave? The female disciple mumbled. The 3 tests of the Heaven's Works path could be seen as a path. The place where the female disciple was at was the entrance. If one gave up midway, they could directly walk out from the other end of the path. Of course, if they succeeded, they would also be rewarded with a blacksmith token at the end of the path. But in the eyes of the female disciple, Yi Guchen had most likely given up and silently left. I've already told you not to bite off more than you can chew at such a young age. There are millions of geniuses in the South Horizon region, but only 10 of them can become the 10 great young masters. Do you think everyone is like Nangong Juyin? The female disciple shook her head and smiled. However, at this moment, the entire Heavenly Craftsman Road suddenly emitted a series of noises. What's going on? The female disciple was startled like a frightened rabbit. A light screen lit up in midair, and a voice sounded at the same time. You have successfully cleared the trial. You have received a 6-star blacksmith token. This voice was incomparably majestic, spreading from the heavenly arts path to all directions. Not to mention the female disciples, everyone within 100 miles of the heavenly craftsman path could hear it. This voice came from the heavenly craftsman path. Someone has successfully passed the heavenly craftsman path and obtained a 6-star blacksmith token. SSS. How long has it been since a 6-star blacksmith appeared in the Heavenly Craftsman path? Which senior is it? The commotion caused by the Heavenly Craftsman Road shocked many people in the city. They didn't expect that at this critical juncture, there would actually be such a blacksmith master appearing. As for the female disciple in the hall, her face was incomparably pale, and her eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Impossible. How could it be that youth? Even if he started cultivating in his mother's womb, It's impossible for him to be a 6-star blacksmith. The female disciple was completely stupefied, as if she was struck by lightning. Although she found it hard to believe, she couldn't deceive herself. Because only Yi Guchen alone had entered the heavenly craftsman path. Other than him, it was impossible for a second person to pass the trial. And most importantly, Yi Guchen was simply too young. At this age, it was already rare to see a 2-star blacksmith, let alone a 6-star blacksmith master. This was even more terrifying than Nangong Juyun's results from the heavenly craftsman path. Not good. I still haven't recorded that youth's identity. The female disciple thought of this, and her face was as pale as paper. She hurriedly rushed to the other end of the heavenly craftsman path. However, when she arrived, there was no one there. What kind of existence did I miss? The female disciple stood in a daze, her body trembling like a quail. If a genius had passed the heavenly craftsman path, she would have recorded it and sent the information to the divine artifacts sect. Then she would have received a generous reward. Not to mention, that youth was very likely to be an extremely monstrous 6-star blacksmith master. If this news was sent back to the divine artifact sect, the reward she would receive would be unimaginable. However, all of this had gone down the drain because of her lazy and impatient attitude. At this moment, the female disciple's heart was filled with regret and a trace of fear. If that monstrous youth joins the divine artifact sect, I'm finished. The female disciple's mouth was filled with bitterness and anxiety. Moreover, even if he didn't join, the female disciple wouldn't have a good ending. After all, many people in the area knew that a 6-star blacksmith had appeared in the heavenly craftsman path, and it would probably spread to the divine artifact sect soon. When the female disciple couldn't produce Yi Guchen's identity, it was easy to imagine how severe the punishment would be. The female disciple's heart was filled with regret at the thought of this. On the other side, Yi Guchen had already left the heavenly craftsman path. He was toying with a golden token in his hand. There were 6 golden stars on it, and the image of a blacksmith hammer below it. A 6-star blacksmith master? I didn't think that I would have reached this level. Yi Guchen muttered to himself. In truth, the rank of a blacksmith didn't have much to do with one's cultivation. For example, Mo Tianfeng's strength wasn't at the top. He was only a venerable. However, he was an 8-star blacksmith master that even saints had to treat with respect. Therefore, it was normal for Yi Guchen to be a 6-star blacksmith master with his strength. However, Yi Guchen wasn't complacent. That Nangong Jueyin was already a 5-star blacksmith when he challenged the heavenly craftsman path a long time ago. He must be even stronger now. I can't underestimate him. Yi Guchen thought to himself as he put away the token. Mo Tianfeng only asked him to take a 2-star blacksmith token, so that he could directly become an outer disciple of the divine artifact sect. Now Yi Guchen directly took a 6-star blacksmith token. In the divine artifact sect, this level was barely at the level of an elder. It was beyond the scope of a disciple. It's a pity that the heart demon flame isn't enough for me now. If I can get a more powerful rare flame, it should be more helpful for my blacksmithing. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly, feeling that it was a pity. The heart demon flame had been with him for a long time. Among the rare flames, the quality of the heart demon flame was considered quite good. However, it hadn't reached the peak yet. As for Nangong Jueyun, as the prodigy of an overlord clan, and the disciple of Xiao Gongsheng, the rare flame he had was obviously not bad. Yi Guchen wanted to upgrade his rare flame. However, this kind of thing depended on luck. It could only be found by chance. By the way, I heard that there are some trading areas in the Heavenly Craftsman City. I can go take a look later. Let's go back to the inn first. Yi Guchen thought to himself as he turned back to the inn. Chapter 1331. When Yi Guchen returned to the inn, he saw the divine condor and Blackie. I met a beautiful lady today. Unfortunately, she's going to be forced to marry a man she doesn't like. The divine condor sighed. Why are you concerned about this? Yi Guchen shook his head and smiled. After all, they were of different species. She's so beautiful that I can't help her. Boy, why don't you go and save her? The divine condor flapped its wings and said, I don't have time for that. Come with me to the trading zone tomorrow, Yi Guchen said. Okay, the divine condor replied. In a famous luxurious pavilion in the heavenly craftsman city, a man whose entire body was charred black and was in an extremely sorry state hurriedly walked up to the first floor of the pavilion. Inside the pavilion, there was good wine and delicious food. Many young men and women were toasting each other. They all raised their cups and toasted to the young man in the middle of the table. The man in the middle of the table was wearing a blue robe with cloud patterns. His face was handsome and his hair was tied up with a jade crown. He looked elegant. His eyes were incomparably deep. What was more strange was that there seemed to be two flames of different colors in his eyes. One was golden and the other was silver. This man was one of the 10 young masters, the divine weapon young master, Nangong Juyun. Senior brother Nangong, you're definitely going to be the young sect master this time. An inner disciple of the divine weapon sect raised his cup and toasted. Haha, don't be so sure. There are still people in the divine weapon sect who are qualified to compete for the young sect master position. Nangong Juyun smiled faintly. Although they were modest words, the aloof and calm faintly revealed from the corners of his eyes and brows revealed his true feelings. Haha, senior brother Nangong is truly modest. Even that Song Feichen is absolutely unable to compare to senior brother Nangong, said another woman. Her eyes were filled with adoration for Nangong Juyun. Song Feichen was the most talented forger in the younger generation of the divine weapon sect besides Nangong Juyun. If there was anyone who could stop Nangong Juyun from becoming the young sect master, Song Feichen was probably the only one. Before Yang Qi had gone to look for Duan Tianfeng, he had also placed all his bets on Song Feichen. That's not necessarily true. Nangong Juyun smiled modestly. At this moment, a disheveled man stumbled in from the door. It was the man in luxurious clothes who had gone to look for Gu Xiangling. Nangong Yuan, what's going on? I told you to invite Xiangling. Why did it turn out like this? Nangong Juyun slightly frowned when he saw that. Young master, she doesn't know what's good for her. Not only did she refuse the invitation, she even allowed the demonic beast to injure me. Nangong Yuan said angrily with a bitter face. I see. It's fine if she doesn't want to come. The end result will be the same anyway, Nangong Juyun said indifferently. He took the position of young sect master and married Gu Xiangling just to consolidate his position. Furthermore, Gu Xiangling herself could be considered a rather beautiful woman, so Nangong Juyun was not disgusted at having such a beautiful wife for free. As for Gu Xiangling rejecting him, Nangong Juyun did not mind, because he believed that love would grow with time. All right, let's not make things unpleasant. Everyone, drink to your heart's content, Nangong Juyun said with a smile. After 3 rounds of drinking, a disciple of the artifact sect suddenly said, Senior brother Nangong, do you know the hottest thing in the South Horizon region recently? You mean the battle at the Sacred Emperor Realm? Nangong Juyun took a sip of wine and said, That's right. I didn't think that Jian Kuei from the Sword Dynasty would be Yi Guchen, the one who once obtained the God Devourer sword. He's in the limelight now and has even become one of the 10 young masters, young master sword, the disciple said with a sigh. Another female disciple said hesitantly, but I heard that Yi Guchen seems to be related to that person. The female disciple did not say who it was, but all the disciples of the artifact sect knew. She was referring to the Southern Refinement Sacred Hand, the Heaven Forging Edge. In the artifact sect, this was a taboo name that could not be talked about. That was because Xiao Gongcheng, the emperor of the North Yen artifact, was one of the leaders of the artifact sect. He hated it the most when people mentioned the Forging Heaven Edge in front of him. As Xiao Gongcheng's disciple, Nangong Juyun must have some opinions on this matter. Nangong Juyun shook his head and said, I know. You mean that Yi Guchen is Tianfeng's disciple. But it's not a big deal. I admit that he's quite strong since he was able to kill Gu Xiaoyang. But how good is his forging ability? At least, I've never heard of his achievements in forging. That's true. We're overthinking it. Yi Guchen probably doesn't know about the artifact sect. That's right. So what if he knows? Is he going to come and compete with senior brother Nangong for the position of junior master? That's right. That's ridiculous. I think that Yi Guchen is already a 3-star blacksmith. Haha. At the banquet, many disciples of the artifact sect mocked Yi Guchen and tried to curry favor with Nangong Juyun. Nangong Juyun didn't care at all. In his opinion, no matter if it was Song Feichen or Yi Guchen, there was no way they could beat him in terms of forging, because he had inherited Xiao Gongqing's divine-grade forging art. At the same time, in a secluded courtyard of the artifact sect, Tianfeng also met with First Elder Yang Qi. It seems that you still chose Yi Guchen. Yang Qi sighed softly. That's right. He's the one I chose. I believe in him. Tianfeng swore. Since it's your choice, I won't interfere. However, I'll still place my hopes on Song Feichen. He's the only person in the artifact sect who has a chance of beating Nangong Juyun. Yang Qi said. Heh, I've already sent Yi Guchen to the Heavenly Crafts Path. Tianfeng said. Heavenly Crafts Path? So what? Can he get 3 or 4 stars? Yang Qi shook his head. But at this moment, a disciple of the artifact sect hurried in and cupped his hands. Reporting to First Elder, the Heavenly Crafts Path. Path? The disciple stuttered, his face flushed red. He was clearly very excited. What's going on? Don't panic. Speak. Yang Qi said. Someone from the Heavenly Crafts Path has become a 6-star artificer. The disciple said. What? Yang Qi's mind shook. He couldn't recover from the shock. The disciple continued. And according to the news from the disciples stationed at the Heavenly Crafts Path, the person who challenged the Heavenly Crafts Path seems to be a young man. These words almost made Yang Qi's breathing stop. What did this mean? Could another monster like Nangong Juyun have appeared? One had to know that even Song Feichen was only a 5-star artificer right now. What about that person? Did he leave anything behind? Yang Qi's breathing quickened. His face was filled with excitement. Was that young man sent by the heavens to help them deal with Nangong Juyun? That young man seemed to have left. The disciples stationed at the Heavenly Crafts Path didn't leave any information about him. The disciple lowered his head and replied. What? Damned idiot. Give that disciple 1,000 whips and expel him from the artifact sect. Also, hurry up and find that young man. Yang Qi shouted. His face was flushed red from anger. But at this moment, a laugh suddenly rang out. Yang Qi, you don't need to waste any more effort. The person who spoke was Tianfeng. How can we let go of such a monstrous artificer? Yang Qi frowned. No, what I mean is that you don't need to look for him at all. Because, Tianfeng chuckled. Yang Qi was stunned at first. Then he suddenly came back to his senses and took a deep breath. You mean could it be? Chapter 1332. When he thought of this possibility, Yang Qi's body trembled in disbelief. That's right. If my guess is correct, it should be Yi Guchen. Duan Tianfeng smiled proudly. To be honest, Duan Tianfeng was also shocked when he heard this news. In his expectations, Yi Guchen being able to become a 4-star blacksmith was already very good. That was because Yi Guchen's main focus was still on cultivation. It was already very difficult for him to not deteriorate on the path of blacksmithing. However, Duan Tianfeng still underestimated Yi Guchen's talent in blacksmithing. At such a young age, Yi Guchen had already become a 6-star blacksmith. It was conceivable that in the future, Yi Guchen would surpass his master and surpass him. So that's how it is. Yang Qi suppressed the shock in his heart and did not recover for a long time. However, when he thought about it carefully, there seemed to be no other possibility apart from Yi Guchen. Duan Tianfeng, you've taken in a good disciple. Yang Qi could not help but sigh. It could be said that their Divine Tool sect had gathered the majority of the blacksmithing geniuses in the South Horizon region. However, not a single one of them could reach the same height as Yi Guchen at such a young age. However, it's still too early to celebrate. The path of heavenly works can only give a rough evaluation of a blacksmith's skill. It does not represent everything, Yang Qi said after some thought. Duan Tianfeng nodded slightly. That was true. The path of heavenly works only tested a blacksmith's skill in 3 main areas. However, true blacksmithing was extremely complicated and involved many aspects. Although Yi Guqin's performance in the path of heavenly works was outstanding, no one knew how strong his actual blacksmithing ability was. Furthermore, that Nangong Juyin passed the path of heavenly works a long time ago and obtained a 5-star blacksmith's token. His current blacksmithing ability can only be high, Yang Qi continued. You're right. However, I still believe in him. He won't disappoint me, Duan Tianfeng said confidently. I hope so. After all, I don't want Divine Tool Sect to become a puppet of the Nangong family and Shaogongshu. Yang Qi sighed. He was still unsure of Yi Guqin's forging ability, but he had successfully passed the heavenly arts path and received the evaluation of a 6-star forging master. Logically speaking, no matter how low his actual standard was, it shouldn't be lower than 5-star. In this way, he would be on the same level as Song Feichen. If we include Yi Guqin, we have at least 2 5-star blacksmiths on our side. Hopefully, we can stop Nangong Juyin, Yang Qi said. The next day, Yi Guqin and Little He left the inn. There were still 7 or 8 days until the young master selection of the artifact sect. Yi Guqin also prepared to take advantage of this gap, to take a look at the trading area of Heavenly Craftsmanship City. As the largest blacksmith city in the South Horizon region, the Heavenly Craftsman City's trading area was also quite famous. There were all sorts of rare and precious materials, too many to count. Some of the rare flames that were hard to find in other places were also commonly traded in the trading zone. Not long after, Yi Guqin arrived at the trading area of the Heavenly Craftsman City. Inside the trading area, people were jostling one another, and it was extremely lively. On both sides of the street, there were all kinds of hawkers. Don't miss this. Rare materials are on sale. All for only 1,000 heaven crystals. Take a look. Take a look. A quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon forging hammer. It's a must-have for forging, traveling and killing. Big brother, are you still worried about not being able to find a suitable heavenly and earthly flame? I have a mysterious heavenly and earthly flame map here. With it, you can easily find a heavenly and earthly flame. Yi Guqin smiled faintly as he looked at the bustling and smoke-filled trading area. Most of the items traded here were very unreliable. They were used to scam people to make money. However, with Yi Guqin's experience, he naturally wouldn't be deceived. He had also been paying attention to the rare flames, but after a few searches, he found that these rare flames were actually fake. Most of the so-called rare flames were disguised by demonic beast flames. Even if there were a few real rare flames, their power and quality were not as good as the extinguishing heart demon flame. Moreover, the price was not low. Naturally, Yi Guqin didn't care about them. Rare flames are very rare. The quality of the extinguishing heart demon flame is also considered to be above average. If you want to find a higher quality flame, you can't do it in 10 days or half a month. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly. It seemed that it was impossible to find a higher quality and more powerful heavenly unique flame before the young sect master selection. Yi Guqin took a step back and began to look for some precious materials. As for the sacred material, although Yi Guqin also wanted to find it, it was obviously not that easy. Even if he was extremely lucky, he could find it. The value of the sacred material must be astronomical. Yi Guqin couldn't get it at all. After searching for a while, Yi Guqin also found some precious materials. At this time, an incomparably magnificent building in front attracted Yi Guqin's attention. The building was resplendent and magnificent. The flow of people coming and going was very terrifying. There were also many onlookers. Yi Guqin was curious. He went up to a young man and asked. The man cast a sidelong glance at Yi Guqin and said, "Is this your first time in the Heavenly Craftsmanship City?" "Yes." Yi Guqin nodded. "This place is called the Thousand Treasures House. It's a stone-cutting place." The young man said. "Stone cutting?" Yi Guqin was slightly puzzled. The young man said with a smile, "You laymen don't know. Many precious materials are sealed in some stones. Only when they are cut can they be determined. Before they are cut, everything is unknown. The Million Treasures Workshop is the largest gathering place of stone materials in the heavenly craftsmanship city. Someone once cut out a sacred material here, and someone once cut out a ball of natural fire. Don't you think it's awesome? The young man clicked his tongue and sighed. I see. There's such a business. Yi Guchen suddenly understood. However, as someone who has been through this before, I advise you to watch the show. After all, the price of each piece of stone is not cheap. The lowest price starts from 100,000 heaven crystals. However, in the end, it might be a pile of trash that is not even worth a single heaven crystal. The young man sighed. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered. He finally understood. Stone cutting was also very dependent on luck. If one was not careful, they might lose everything. I used to have 1,000,000 heaven crystals with me, until I met a stone cutting. Young man, listen to my advice. Just look at it. Don't touch it. The young man said earnestly. Thank you. Yi Guchen nodded slightly, and then walked straight into the Thousand Treasures house. Hey, you don't listen to my advice? Seeing Yi Guchen enter the Thousand Treasures house without hesitation, the young man shouted. He was just trying to persuade him, but the young man didn't listen at all. Well, I'd like to see how many rounds you can afford to lose. The young man thought and followed in. Back then, he had bought 10 pieces of stone and lost all his money. With this young man's rash appearance, he should lose everything in half a day. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.